Are live. This is awesome. So I'm here with Hunting Appalachia. I discovered him on TikTok, and it was a very interesting stream. A stream about hunting feral cats,
Yeah,
what seems very anti-vegan, but I think upon reflection, I think a lot of vegans would actually agree that we should hunt feral cats. But anyways, did you want to, I guess, introduce yourself and tell everyone what you're about and what
yeah.
your main message is? And yeah.
So, hi, my name is Ethan. I am a 20-year-old animal science and equine sciences major from southeastern Kentucky. I work as a tech for Kentucky Fish and Wildlife, and I have been passionate about wildlife conservation for as long as I can remember. I have hunted ever since I can remember. I remember my first solo hunt that I ever did and was successful was when I was 6 years old. So it's not something I just talk about, but it's a lifestyle I also live. Now, through beginning as a hunter in life and moving into conservation, they've kind of gone hand in hand with me to a point where now conservation is my main focus, and I look at how hunting can benefit that and affect that. And from that, I have built a community on TikTok of a little over 6,000 people now who come and we do live streams and talk about kind of controversial topics in the hunting and conservation world and really challenge people to think on them and encourage discussion in a respectful manner. So I'm excited to be here and excited to talk to y'all.
Awesome. Yeah, I love to talk to non-vegans and vegans as well, but especially non-vegans. Um, and I would imagine that we have a lot that's actually shared. I'm very sympathetic towards the argument for hunting. Um, my main issue is factory farming.
Yeah,
I want to get rid of that, and then hunting's a separate issue, I think. But I wanted to kind of start off with the big topic of feral cats. So, did you want to kind of give your argument for why we should hunt feral cats?
of course. So in the United States alone, there are 85 million feral cats. Now, for those of you all that don't know, the definition of feral is one generation removed from human contact. So these are cats that are not owned and have never been owned. There's 85 million of them. Now, of these 85 million feral cats here in the United States, they are responsible for the death of 63 billion of our native songbirds a year and 5 billion of our native small reptiles and small mammals. When it comes to feral cats, they are a primary spreader of zoonotic diseases. These are diseases that can be spread from species to species. Examples of these are toxoplasmosis, trichinosis, tularemia, sarcocistis, brucellosis, boreola, rabies, and also the bubonic plague. And when it comes to management of feral cat populations, the main management system we are currently using is a trap, neuter, release program, which, according to the American Bird Conservancy, which is the governing body for songbird population health and the control of feral cat populations and the effects that population control have on that population. Trap neuter release programs have been highly ineffective at slowing the spread of feral cat populations, except for some studies done in highly urbanized areas. So we need a better management system to help to save our native species. And I look at what works. Australia, Indonesia, and New Zealand all have feral cat culling systems. Now, some of these are a bounty on feral cats where you can go out in the woods and actually hunt feral cats like you're hunting any other game species. Some of them are different. The system we propose here in the United States would be a live trapping system where you can catch a cat in a live trap on your property, call a fish and game district trapper or a certified euthanasia technician. They can come out to your property, scan for a microchip, look for a collar, assess the cat's behavior. If they deem that cat to be feral, then they can euthanize that cat on your property. So,
Cool. Yeah, I actually 100% agree with that. And coming from like a vegan perspective, one thing that I was thinking about when I heard this on your stream is that and by the way, we have Jeremy Gord here, and he's saying it's a good case. So we actually have me and Jeremy have very similar ethical frameworks.
yeah,
Um, but so an argument can be made where so I care about animal suffering, right? And when I see a lion eating a zebra, I think that's a like it's bad for the zebra at least, right? There's really no
Yeah.
difference between them being stabbed by a knife or being stabbed by a lion's tooth. Um, so I think like if it were possible to stop a lion from eating a zebra that wouldn't cause an ecological collapse, it'd probably be a good thing, right? But it's perhaps like a necessary evil where it's like
Yes.
um, while lions eating zebras may cause suffering in the short term, it actually may reduce suffering in the bigger picture because it protects the environment or protects the
Yeah.
um, yeah. But with feral cats, cats are like obligate carnivores. And when you have pet cats, like these days with modern technology, we've been able to develop vegan cat food. So you can sort of have a vegan cat and they can, live uh, healthy and happy in a home. But with feral cats, they're obligate carnivores. So they're going out and they're essentially being lions to zebras, or they're being lions to mice and birds and things. So
Yeah.
they're just going out and causing all this sort of harm and suffering, but there's no justification for it. They're not actually like contributing to the environment or contributing to the bigger picture. It's really in the same realm of factory farming because they're just causing all this suffering. Yeah, and with little justification. So
Exactly.
yeah.
And what people, so the main argument that I hear against it is not one based on facts, because my main thing with everything that I talk about is I want to present you with facts from studies that have valid sources and have been peer reviewed. And like, I'm not going to come on here and just start lying about stuff, because all that's going to do is make this argument look worse. And I'm trying to be a promoter for this. Um, People will argue morals, saying that, well, cats are pets. What if it's someone's pet? These kind of things. And I hear that. For one, if you have an outdoor cat, you're an irresponsible cat owner. That is a hill I will die on. Cats are not meant to be outdoor animals. That allows them to predate on our native species and also be predated on. Now, feral cats do have some predators here in the United States, being coyotes, bobcats, some birds of prey. If you have an outdoor cat, they can fall victim to any of those. So it's not safe for the cat. It's not safe for the rest of our native wildlife. And also, outdoor cats and feral cats in general live deplorable lives. Their average lifespan is only about 2 to 3 years, compared to an indoor cat. It can range 15 to 20. So you're significantly decreasing the average lifespan of this animal because of improper care. So don't have an outdoor cat. If you do have an outdoor cat, don't allow it to be on other people's property. It's as simple as that. I am a hunter. I respect property owners' rights, and I would not want my neighbor's animal free roaming my property, causing ecological destruction. That's just common sense. So with this program that we talk about, if a feral cat is, or I'm sorry, if a neighbor's cat or someone's pet cat is caught on your property in a live trap, as long as we can, identify that it is a pet, and that will be easy to do, find a collar or a microchip, then that pet owner would be fined, because it's the same as dogs. Dogs and cats should be held to the same standard. If you have someone else's dog on your property, in some states, the dog owner is fined for not having proper control over that animal. And so we are a big proponent of that. And like I said, with people arguing against it, you hear a lot of morality-based arguments saying, no, we shouldn't do this. They're cats, they're pets. I like to throw out the statistics about other feral animals here in the United States. We hear about Burmese pythons down in Florida, feral hogs. You hear about all these other invasive species that are causing so much damage, and people want them eradicated and gone. But then you also have to realize, according to Fish and Wildlife here in the United States, feral cats are the most harmful mammalian invasive species. Feral cats cause more harm than feral pigs, and that's saying something, because feral pigs are destroying entire ecosystems in the South. So people can argue it morally and disagree with it morally, and if you do, that's perfectly fine. I mean, I'm not against you in any way, but for me, from a morality standpoint, I would much rather protect our native species and be proactive about this issue instead of reactive, and not wait until we're seeing species go extinct before we finally decide to make a change and try to save our native species.
Yeah. So yeah, in the context of feral cats, I think it's actually it'll be pretty hard to make a compelling moral case for not euthanizing them. Um, whether you're coming from like me from like a utilitarian sense or even like a rights-based deontological sense as well. Feral cats are causing more rights violations um, out out and about, killing all these other animals, um, than they would if they were just didn't exist or they were euthanized.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you as kind of a fun experiment is like, imagine um somebody gave you like a letter or an envelope or something, and within this envelope was like the argument for why we shouldn't euthanize feral cats. It just like it clicks in your head. What is the greatest argument against um not euthanizing feral cats?
So I would say probably the risk of euthanizing someone's pet would probably be the greatest argument against it. Just because you don't want to have you don't want to ever euthanize someone's family pet. That's just morally speaking wrong. You don't want to do that. The only other argument that I can think of from a morality standpoint is it's a human being's fault that these cats are even here. I hear people come in my stream all the time and talking about it, saying it's not the cat's fault, it's the human's fault. And I agree with you. Human beings are the most destructive species on Earth, but we're also the only ones that can fix that destruction that we have caused. So, yes, it is our fault the cats are here. The cats are just doing what cats do, um, but they also need managed. So, when it comes to arguing against euthanizing them, I would say the greatest one that I can see is actually accidentally euthanizing someone's pet. But if their pet is already on our property, that's an issue. And also, we'll take every step possible to prevent that from occurring.
Okay. Yeah, I think we both won't agree with that argument, but um, I'm trying to think of a better one. I think the risk to killing someone's pet is probably the best argument against it. Um, there are ways in which we can tell if it's someone's pet, and they're pretty reliable, but
Hmm.
it's not always going to be the case.
Yeah,
There's going to be a couple of there will actually most likely be a couple of times where we actually do kill someone's pet, just because not every pet has a collar, not every pet has a tag.
exactly.
Um, yeah,
But that will also be, and a roundabout way, that will also be a better way to promote responsible cat ownership. Because if people's pet cats are getting euthanized through these feral cat control programs, then that will help people to be like, all right, I need to keep my cat inside. So, although it is a sad thing that it's happening, it can also help to save our native species and to help these cats live better lives.
yeah, I agree. Um, I I have an idea, and I wanted to get your take on it. So
Yeah,
so a lot of vegans actually are actually against pet ownership.
yeah,
Where I actually am very pro pet ownership. I think I think it's good for the animals, and I think it's good for the humans as well. But there is an issue where it comes to there's a lot of bad pet owners, and there's
yes,
very little regulation when it comes to it. Like, your average Joe can just go to Petco or PetSmart and buy a dog and feed it a bad diet and don't walk it and don't train it and all these things. So, and we have sort of regulations about animal abuse when it comes to cats and dogs. But we don't really have much regulation when it comes to who can own a cat or a dog. So I think that we should actually have, you should be forced to like take a class and pass a test and get a license before you can actually own an animal.
So I would say that is in a utopian world, that would be a great thing. But because of the world that we live in, that probably could never occur. Just because, in that sense, asking someone to do this before they can own a cat or a dog, then we should also ask them to do that before they, say, have a child. Because it's the same sense. If you can't properly care for a cat or dog and can't pass that test, then by that logic, should you not also be allowed to have a child? And then if you're restricting someone's, ability to have kids, then you're restricting their basic human rights. And so it would be a very slippery slope to go down because that could turn into a whole thing. But I do understand where you're coming from, and instead of limiting um, who can own cats and dogs, I would say a better way to do it would be to mandate more laws in order to promote responsible pet ownership. So, for example, talking about cats, make it to where if you're going to have a cat outside, have it on a leash. Have leash laws for cats because then you're going to restrict the damage that animal can cause. And if someone does not follow those leash laws for cats, then we can have a conversation about having the animal taken away from them and revoking their rights to own that animal because that already occurs now in cities where people don't follow leash laws.
Interesting. So I think I agree with you in a practical sense, but not in a like an actual like ethical like philosophical sense. Coming from someone who actually the I only value rights in a sense that it increases well-being. So if something will increase well-being that violates rights, I'm
Mm-hmm.
okay with violating those rights. So I would actually bite the bullet on having a license to have kids as well. I think some people shouldn't be allowed to have kids.
And so like I said, I'm from southeastern Kentucky. We have opioid epidemic going on right now, and my mom is a kindergarten teacher, and I see kids in there who literally only eat when they come to school, whose parents do a deplorable job at just basic childcare. So I don't disagree with you, but also when it falls in situations of well, some people can be awful pet owners, or some people might not be qualified to have a pet, but they could also be qualified to have a kid. It can depend on where you live. It can depend on your experience at either or. It depends on a whole lot of factors, and I think the management of that would cause that slippery slope that we could go down because like I said, if you're limiting pet ownership, then that would also mean limiting other healthcare or other, you know, other types of, can you have kids? And that would be a whole conversation that spawns out of it. And so instead, I think we should view it as instead of restrictions, we view it more as education and enforcement.
Okay, I may be able to get behind that just from like a practical sense. It might be easier to get those laws passed than um, those sort of like
Restrictions.
yeah those restrictions passed rather than having um, yeah licensed pet ownership. But I
Yeah,
think I would still think licensed pet ownership is like the would be the utopia goal.
I agree, but I think, like you said, if we're talking about a practicality standpoint, and we want to see something that can make a difference and work towards something better, then enforcement and education, I think, is the route to go. And I think that's with most aspects of a lot of stuff I talk about, whether it's hunting, whether it's pet ownership, whether it's different hunting laws that are being enforced and passed, and we can get into a lot of those too. Um, Enforcement and education are like the two pillars that we should build a lot of things in society off of.
Yeah, well, I mean, so at the same time, um, we've been able to pass regulations when it comes to like getting a driver's license.
Yeah,
Um, and I don't see eventually how we can't do that with pets as well. Same with concealed carry permits, right? Like you have to pass your concealed carry class and get your um, yeah. I think it would probably be easier to have these these sort of uh, regulations when it comes to like having cats on leashes and stuff. Like we could pass that probably honestly within the year. So like it'd be very easy to do. Um, but I don't think licenses are out of the question.
I agree with you. I just think that practicality should be the way that we go for this, at least for right now or in the beginning, because we can actually see a positive change at first.
Gotcha. I kind of wanted to do a quick segue, sort of back to the original hunting feral cats, but kind of make it more towards the general hunting,
Yes,
because uh, I think a very good argument can be made for hunting feral cats, but when it comes to non-carnivore animals, it gets a little bit trickier. So,
I got
uh,
you. I
yeah,
will
yeah,
tell. I can explain to you why hunting is necessary and needed, specifically in North America. So in North America, the way that we operate for the wildlife conservation is built off the North American model of wildlife conservation. Now, for one, when with hunting, one of my topics on my stream is anti-hunting is anti-conservation. So if you are against hunting of wildlife, you are against conservation of wildlife and of our protected public and federal lands. The reason I say this is because one, hunting is the main funder for wildlife conservation. Through the Pittman-Robertson Act, which was passed in the 1970s, which is a 9% excise tax on all hunting goods, munitions, and firearms that is put directly into conservation funding. And also, every hunting license you purchase and fishing license goes directly into wildlife conservation. Now, from a hunting standpoint, do you know what the dynamics of predation are?
The dynamics of predation. No.
Okay. So you know what when we're talking about wavelengths, it looks like a wave going up and down, right?
Hmm.
So the dynamics of predation, in a sense, was before colonization of North America, there was, in general, a balance for our native species that could be dictated on a graph. Now, this graph looks like a wavelength going up and down with a slight lull of another wavelength going behind it. So when one is at a top, one is at a bottom, this one will start to rise to meet it. As it rises, this one falls. So they're always bouncing off one another. That's the basics of the dynamics of predation. Now, whenever human beings came in and colonized and manifest destiny occurred and we started changing the land, the dynamics of predation got thrown off because of those bar graphs. The one that rises and falls in the front is prey animals. The one that follows it is predatory animals. So as we move in, humans don't like predator conflicts. They kill our livestock. They'll predate us. We don't want them around. So in the beginning, we wiped out a lot of these predators. We extirpated them. So we removed them from their environment, but we did not fully make them go extinct. And because of this, prey species were on a continual rise, and there was no predator to stop them other than human beings. Now, because of this, the only way that we can manage these prey species is through hunting. Even with large predator reintroduction, what we see now is with the development of so many diseases like chronic wasting disease, which is a prion disease that is found in white-tailed deer across the United States and is literally causing entire herds to be wiped out right now, and also diseases such as blue tongue. We're seeing that even if we introduce native predatory species, we have to control that population also, because if our prey species hit a lull in the natural dynamics of predation, a disease like chronic wasting disease can cause a mass extinction event, which would throw off our native ecology. So, because of human management in the ecosystem, and because hunters are able to go out and in wildlife conservation, you want to remove about 20% of a species each hunting season, and that maintains a stable level for that population. Because we're able to view that and self-regulate the amount of animals that we take out of the environment, um, we're able to keep these species at a constant scale that does not overload the carrying capacity of an ecosystem, therefore limiting the spread of disease, helping to support genetic diversity, and controlling overpopulation. Without humans hunting, we would not be able to have that. And if all human hunting ended right now, then we would have a complete ecological collapse of our North American wildlife.
Okay, so it seems like your argument comes from uh, valuing the ecosystem, and hunting is required to protect the ecosystem.
Yes.
So for me, I value the ecosystem only in as much that it increases well-being, right?
Yes.
So um, I would just ask, if there was something that actually that hurt the ecosystem but increased animal well-being, would you be in favor of it?
Can you give me an example?
Um, not a practical one, but just like hypothetically, like say um like so say um getting rid of a species. Say
Hmm.
say some species suffers, or they cause an extreme amount of suffering, but they're sort of necessary for the ecosystem. And you go out and you get rid of the species, um, and it ends up increasing animal well-being because they're not causing suffering towards other animals, or they're not suffering themselves. But then it maybe decreases like the um, ecological, I guess, universe by like 20% or 10% or something. Would you be in favor of that?
So no, just because, like you said, on a practicality standpoint, we don't see it occurring because every species in North America fills what is called a
Well, so
niche.
I'm just talking about in a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you care. Do you care about animal well-being or do you care about the environment? And those things
So
go hand in hand, right? But
yeah, I think the best way to put it is as a hunter. There's two ways to view things. You can care about individual deer, or you can care about the idea of a deer. So the best analogy I have for this is an oak tree, right? I'm going to say a word that might seem foreign. I'll explain it. Oak trees produce what you would call an acorn. Here in Appalachia, we say acorn, so I'm going to refer to it as such. Uh, but so oak trees produce acorns, right? Now you can go out and take as many acorns as you want, but as long as you keep that oak tree healthy, then it will produce more acorns the next year. The environment's the same way. As long as you keep that deer herd healthy and sustained, then it will produce more deer for you to go out and harvest that next year. And you can be able to make sure that you keep the oak tree healthy. But if you have too many acorns on the ground around it, they're going to start to grow into new oak trees. And then that's going to start to crowd that tree out. Then you're going to start seeing blight spread between that all those trees that are growing in that specific area, and you're going to see a negative impact on that specific area. It's the same thing with white-tailed deer. So whenever we're talking about um, as a hunter, if I care about well-being or if I care about what was the other thing, well-being or what,
or the environment, like
I think it's a
you know.
mixture of both because with caring about the well-being of a species, I care about the environment because without a healthy environment, you cannot have a good well-being for a species.
Yeah. So okay. So I guess I can give you an even more like extreme hypothetical. So what I see so I think factory farming is like the greatest moral atrocity
Yes.
we face today. And the only thing that may be even worse is wild animal suffering. Um, the wild is no Disney movie. The majority of animals suffer greatly, right? But it seems to be sort of necessary to keep Earth alive, right? But
Yeah.
if we were to go into some utopian world where we got completely rid of um, the wild, and it was just all humans and their pets or whatever, I think that would be a better world. Um, where we sort of get rid of the environment, or we sort of get rid of that aspect of the world. That would be better. And the only issues I have is practical ones, where um, yeah, it's sort of necessary for um, the maximization of well-being.
So I'll tell you why I disagree with that. And that is that ethics and morality is a purely human construct. So if you go out in the woods into nature, I think just a common fact in nature is death is a part of nature. Nature cannot continue to succeed without death. And just like anything in life, whether it's farming for completely vegan produced food or whether it's going out in the woods and harvesting a deer, death is part of everything in life. And with nature, nature does not care. So trying to enforce human morality and ethics on nature, whenever nature is just existing as it has far before we were here and far after it will exist after we are gone, I would say I disagree with. Even if it does reduce suffering, I think in nature that suffering is needed because nature does not view it as suffering. It views it as almost a reset.
What do you mean by reset?
So by reset, I mean if you're out in the woods, right, and you see a pack of wolves that has killed a white-tailed deer, what it does is it removes that deer from the environment. So that is called the removal of a niche. So a niche is a specific thing in an environment that one specific species fills. Um, there's a certain like important niches are filled by what is called a keystone species. That's a whole other topic to get into. But because that deer is now absent from the environment, it creates a vacuum effect. And in that vacuum effect, that allows for another deer from either another area or a young deer to grow up and fill that vacuum. Therefore, it's a reset because that one deer suffered, it allows another deer to go on and be successful and live.
Yeah, so I'm still trying to figure out your ultimate value here, because it seems like you kind of going back to like the practical aspect of it. Um, so do you, yeah, do you tend so do you think nature is good in and of itself?
I don't know the word to describe it. I don't believe that nature is inherently bad, but also not inherently good. I think that nature is its own thing. I think there's a lot of good that occurs in nature, and I think there's a lot of bad. I believe the bad can be necessary, and I believe that the good is earned and deserved.
Yeah, I think I would pretty disagree with that. Again, I think if we could get rid of the wild, um, and not cause an ecological collapse, I think we should. Just because, again, it's not a Disney movie. There's tremendous amounts of suffering, and I don't think it actually matters whether or not nature has a mind to think about it, to reflect on the suffering. In many ways, it's actually worse, right? Um, I don't want to get into tangent, but it kind of gets into like the problem of evil with like the arguments for against God and things like
Yeah,
this, where it's like with humans when they suffer, right? We can think about it, we can rationalize about it, we can kind of come out with a like a Viktor Frankl story,
yeah.
um, right? But when animals suffer, they don't really have the ability to morally reason, right? Um, so they just suffer and they don't know why. They can't come out of it in some sort of better um, sense. They just suffer. They just experience suffering, which I think is even scarier, which is even worse. So the fact that nature doesn't have any, it's sort of amoral, actually makes it worse. It actually increases the suffering.
I see where you're coming from. I really do. But for me, I could not, I'm never going to get behind removing nature and the wilderness and the wild because for me, like I said, and I think this is a place where hunters and vegans differ, is that death is a part of life. Death occurs in everything. And that's something that we will never shed as a society. And along with death comes suffering. And so I think as hunters, what we strive to do, and as wildlife conservationists, is limit the unnecessary suffering. But I also believe that there is such a thing as necessary suffering in nature. Like I mentioned with wolves predating deer, with natural predation, um, I believe that that is necessary suffering, just in the same sense that I believe that death is a part of life and we can never truly escape death.
Cool. So you said a few different things there. So number one, I agree. Definitely, we should. There is necessary suffering. The most common example is like you suffer when you go to the gym, but it's necessary to have a healthy life.
Yeah.
Um, but you also said something, and maybe I heard it wrong, or maybe you misspoke. But de- with death comes suffering. I don't think that's always the case. Going back to the feral cats example, death actually comes well-being, right? You're
Yes.
it's better for the cat, it's better for the other animals, and it's better for the environment as well.
But also the feral cats in general. If a cat becomes feral, then I think 90% of feral cats are disease ridden. And up until the point of death, it is suffering. So death and suffering, in a lot of instances, go hand in hand. And that's with every aspect in life. Um, to have, as a hunter, even to have an ethical, clean, and quick kill without suffering is what we all strive for. But suffering and death also go hand in hand.
They often do, but I don't think they always do.
I would say often, like I said, hunters strive to try and make that as not often as we can, but they do often go hand in hand.
Gotcha. So, staying on the hunting topic, um, I had an idea about like bullets.
Yeah,
So, um, obviously, not everyone is a perfect aim, right?
yeah.
Where if you shoot a deer in the right spot, it's gonna die pretty quickly, which is gonna be probably better off than being eaten alive or starving to death or
Yeah.
freezing to death. Um, but again, not everyone's a good aim, so they might get shot in the leg or something like this. So I was thinking, and I don't know, I'm not a hunter, so I don't know if these actually exist, but like, is there euthanasia bullets where you can sort of hit him in the leg or whatever, and then it, um, yeah, kills them painlessly.
So with hunting, we often don't find the need for that because there's a very popular saying, which is aim small, miss small. So with a deer, a bullet is very small comparative to where you're shooting at in a deer. And also the caliber of gun that you're using to hunt is also a major factor in that. So if you shoot a deer broadside, which is what we call, so like right here where all the vitals are, that's where you'd want to hit. The likelihood of you hitting a flank or a leg, it's not going to happen. Um, like we rarely ever see that. And if you hit right here, say you hit a little far back or a little far down, most of the time, what kills a deer in a gunshot scenario is not loss of blood or not an injury to the organs. Now that plays a major part in it, of course, but oftentimes they die of shock. That's why whenever you shoot a deer, you see it fall over immediately, is because that deer dies in that moment of shock. That's why hunting with a proper caliber is so important, because if you go out and you shoot a deer with like a 22 caliber gun, which is a smaller round, then yes, it will probably die if you hit it in the correct spot, but it's not going to kill that animal of shock. So using a heavier caliber of rifle like a 30-30 or 270 Win Mag, you are able to create that ethical and clean kill without suffering.
Gotcha. I had a quick question about the types of deer that get killed.
Of course.
So yeah, so it seems when I see like pictures of hunters will post on Facebook or Twitter or whatever the deer that they shot, and it seems to be like they try and find the biggest bulk, the biggest antlers, and
Yeah.
it seems like if you want to reduce animal suffering, I mean at least intuitively it feels like you'd want to kill the deer that are least likely to survive through the winter, or least likely to. Um, so why do we shoot the big bulky nice deer, the ones that can survive, and not the ones that are most likely to suffer?
So what you're talking about is called quality deer management. There's an entire association called Quality Deer Management here in the United States, and really the basis around this is protecting the future of deer. Like I said about the idea of deer, it's about protecting the future of deer, because what we're doing in that sense is, for one, bigger bucks are more desirable to kill because we have a value on larger antlers. But in a biological sense, a buck that has a greater antler mass is an older individual who has had a chance to breed and spread his genetics in the ecosystem. Excuse me. And he is a prime candidate to remove, for one, because he is getting older. And like you said, we will start to see a decline in his health in the next year or two after he has reached what's called prime mass in a deer. But also because that allows for that same vacuum effect to be filled by a younger deer from a different area or with different genetics to come in, therefore promoting genetic diversity. So, although some people will say that people who just chase big deer are trophy hunters, what they're actually doing is promoting genetic diversity and protecting the future of deer.
Gotcha. And then the other question would be, why do we then take the meat for ourselves? Why don't we leave it for predators to eat?
So it would be less of predators and more for scavengers, because most predators are not scavengers and most scavengers are not predators. Um, and there's multitudes of reasons for that. For one, you say that you hate factory farming, and I'm right there with you. But I think what's important to realize is people are still going to want to consume meat, right? And I think as a vegan, you realize that people are going to consume meat, and a lot of hunters actually also dislike factory farming. And so for us, consuming meat that we harvest out in the woods is the lesser of two evils because we can go out in the woods, harvest this animal in an ethical way that limits suffering. They only ever have one bad day. And then that could be enough meat to supply us for a year. Um, and so we're not going to waste that because then if we're going to want to eat meat, we don't have to rely on factory farming. But also because leaving that meat out in the woods is illegal. It's called wanton waste. If you just leave that meat out in the woods, you can lose your hunting license. You can be fined heavily. You can go to jail. So it's not a practice that's allowed here in the United States. And from a moral standpoint, talking about leaving that out for the predators are doing fine. Deer populations here in North America are bigger and better than they ever have been. And leaving that carcass out in the woods to rot, if it's not consumed by a predator, can actually help to spread disease to other deer, like CWD, because that's a disease spread through the prions of the brain.
Gotcha. Yeah. So my thought process of why it may reduce suffering is just I don't like deer being eaten alive, and if animals can eat dead deer that have already died
Yeah,
through a quick shot, that seems more ethical to me. But if yeah, again, if there is a bigger issue, like if the suffering of spreading diseases to deer and things like this is greater, then I think it would probably be ethical to take it then.
yeah. That's the main talking about limiting suffering, especially in nature. The reason why one of the reasons why I support hunting so much, other than the fact that I enjoy hunting because it gets me close to the environment, is because right now deer, elk, cervids is what that is called, are facing a disease called CWD, chronic wasting disease. It's a prion disease, and it literally eats away at the brain. It is a slow and painful death. And the main way that we track the spread of that disease and control that disease is through cooperation with hunters. Here in the state of Kentucky, if you harvest a deer, you take it to a check station and they will check that deer for CWD. Um, if you kill a deer with CWD, ends it suffering a lot more quickly. It's better for the deer. And without hunters going out and contributing to deer hunting, we would not have the success of managing CWD that we currently have.
Gotcha. Okay, I may be able to get behind that. I'll do some more research, but
Yeah.
I understand at least the argument for it. So I wanted you to. There's a comment from Jeremy here, and I thought it was pretty funny. So he says, Ted Bundy, by seeking out the most conventionally attractive woman, served the dating ecosystem by giving other women more of a chance.
So what I will say is a better comparison for that would be is uh, if you had a guy who was a sperm donor and he got taken out by a different guy. What you're doing is making it to where another guy can instead be that sperm donor. That way, you're not going to have a bunch of inbred kids running around. That's a better way to think about it.
Interesting. Um, Sort of on the same topic of hunting, but switching over to a little bit more broadly veganism. Um, I thought I saw a TikTok where you don't buy meat or animal products from the supermarket.
No, all the meat that I consume, I either raise myself through permaculture agricultural practices, or I go out and get from the land.
Awesome. So sounds like you're more vegan than the majority of the world. So and you may be. I mean, I would want to sort of test sort of the consistency, but you under my definition of veganism, it's possible you could be vegan.
From the
Um,
vegans I've talked to, I've had a few people tell me that I am, um, but at the same time, I personally identify myself as first and foremost a conservationist and second most a hunter. Just because I still consume meat, I will continue to consume meat, but I want to do it in a way where I don't have to rely on other people to get that meat. I don't want to do it in a way where I can guarantee that the animals that I am harvesting do not come from a situation that was detrimental to them.
Gotcha. So okay, so through talking to vegans, I'm sure you've heard of the name the trait argument.
Yes.
So I'd ask you to name the trait, right? So what is so I would imagine you wouldn't be okay with like hunting humans.
No, and I can tell you why specifically. So, human beings, like I said, are the most harmful species to ever exist on this planet. We have changed it permanently in negative ways. But there's two reasons why we should not hunt humans. Number one is because we're the only species that can self regulate, which means that we're the only species that can control the damage that we have caused and try to fix it in any way that we can. And number two is that when it comes to human beings, how we have changed this earth, um, morally speaking, we are the only species that, if we get rid of ourselves completely, will not be a net positive because of all the invasive species that we have produced in places where they shouldn't be, and because of the changes that we have made, we're the only ones that can now fix it on both a global warming scale, on a pollution scale, and an invasive species scale. So, getting rid of human beings would not help the environment.
Gotcha. So I actually agree that the humans are the only animals that can self-regulate, and that they are a net positive. But what about humans? Because again, humans come in all different shapes and sizes. So what about
Yeah.
humans that cannot do that? So like the mentally ill, um, or maybe like babies or yeah, people that don't have that mind state with that ability to self-regulate.
Society keeps that in check. So, although people may not be able to self regulate, we still require that in society. And we do not allow for people to not self regulate and have a detrimental impact on the environment.
So suppose there was maybe some sort of like homeless population who were actually causing harm to the environment.
Yeah. So, if there was, then I would say from even a hunting standpoint, the first course of action still would not be to go out and start hunting them. Instead, it would be to, like I said, enforce and educate. And then if that still does not work from societal standards, it would be that restriction like we talked about. Because humans are the only ones that process morality in the animal world, at least to our knowledge. And the only ones that can really establish an ethical code. And because of that, I would say that although hunting humans is not okay, we can still enforce that and inflict punishments if people do not listen to the education or adhere to the enforcement.
Yeah, so I see maybe an issue here. So what we're talking about here is a subset of humans that don't have that ability to think in that way. So they
Yeah.
maybe their brain has been harmed in some way, or maybe they were just born with bad brain chemistry.
Yes.
So we have a subset of like these homeless humans running around causing havoc to the ecosystem. Um, and it seems like you say like the first sort of we shouldn't go straight to hunting, but I don't know if you'd like apply that to deer.
So I think a better way to apply that and talking about how we have individuals in the ecosystem don't realize the harm they're doing, or they do and they can't process it and can't self-regulate it. Those aren't species would necessarily hunt because those would tend to be invasive species and that population gets out of hand. And even with most invasive species, hunting is not the first choice. Instead, what we would begin to do is relocation efforts, removing them from a situation where they are harming the environment. That's what we tend to do in most of those situations in a conservation world. Instead of first resorting to violence and to a cull, as it's called in conservation. So removing them from a situation where they can cause damage.
Gotcha. And you don't think we can do that with deer?
So with deer, it's different because, like I said, they are a native species. They cannot self-regulate, but they're also a keystone species. That phrase that I mentioned earlier, which means if you remove deer from an environment, complete ecological collapse. Now, there is a company in Canada, and I've talked to a few vegans about this called Spayvac, who has proposed using contraceptives on deer to kind of negate hunting. But the issue with that is Deer can live anywhere between 2 to 6 years. This contraceptive lasts 5 years, which means we would lose complete generations of deer. And that gets back to why death is natural, because death does not discriminate on a natural standpoint, therefore allowing for that genetic diversity. So that's the reason why something like contraceptives would not work. It would make that population extremely susceptible to inbreeding and to disease.
Would you be open to contraceptives if they were, because like expanded the full lifespan of the deer,
If they didn't span the full lifespan,
or if they did? Because it seems like
so
you're, yeah.
if they did, that's where the issue is created, because then that deer can never
Oh, okay.
reproduce, which means there's no genetic diversity. If they did not span the full lifespan, we would still run into an issue because deer can die prematurely in multitudes of different ways. And so we would still run into a genetic diversity issue. And we would also run into a management issue because deer are extremely finicky creatures and extremely hard to catch. And so, excuse me, from a management issue, we would still not be able to implement that in an effective way. And it would not work.
Gotcha. Yeah, let me think about that. So, okay, so it seems like the main goal is to keep the deer population alive, but keep them
Managed.
managed, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I guess going back to the trait equalized humans, um, would you want to keep? Yeah, would you want to keep these? Would it be better to keep these trait equalized like humans alive and managed, or would you rather just not have these certain um trait equalized humans?
So in this environment, assuming that there is no, uh, it's a tricky question, because in this environment, if we're assuming that there is no outside human predation, right? If we're assuming this is an untouched habitat with these trait equalized humans in it, then we would not need to do anything because the dynamics of predation would be untouched and nature would naturally keep them in check. Now, assuming that there is human hunting and human predation outside of these trait equalized humans, then instead they would act as a native predatory species, and those are easier to keep in check than prey species. So we could do that through a contraceptive system, or we could do that through relocation systems. There's multitudes of different ways we could do that. Um, but I would say that definitely hunting and a cull of this species would not be the first or second option on the table. It would more than likely be a last resort that we wouldn't have to come to because there's so many other options.
Gotcha. Yeah, I would actually I personally if it's the case that hunting reduces animal suffering, I would bite the bullet that you would also have to hunt train equalized humans as well. Um,
It
I
depends. So the main thing with hunting that I think a lot of people like to view hunting as this big broad sphere, right? As in, well, you can hunt deer, bear, everything. That's not true. Hunting is very, very, very divided into classifications. Every single animal that you hunt has different regulations around it, has different cull rates, has different tag ratios that you produce for that environment in order to keep that species sustainable. There's even endangered species that we have hunted that have helped bring them back from extinction. We have examples of this. One of the greatest ones is the scimitar horned oryx, which is an antelope that was native to Saudi Arabia, went extinct in the wild. Because of hunting ranches in Texas, we were able to bring the species back because hunters gave this species a value, and it was reintroduced into Saudi Arabia just a few years ago. And that was an effort that was put on by hunters who enjoyed hunting the scimitar horned oryx. So hunting is a very complicated matter in that it is divided species by species, and there are some species that we don't hunt, but we still manage intensively through wildlife conservation, which is funded by hunting. So when it comes down to a species by species basis, I think what makes the most sense is to handle it in that case. So Comparing a species of trait equalized humans to a species of deer on a basic level, yes, you can look at what we do to deer and managing them. But at a population standpoint and at a population level, and even deeper than that, the traits that these animals exhibit and the niches they fill in that environment will that will show the management approach we need to take. And that's what we do in wildlife conservation all around the world.
Sure. I mean, and you can do that with humans as well, right?
Yeah, you can. We do it as a self-regulatory species. Human beings do it all around the world. It's just like how in China you have a cap on how many kids you can have to help control overpopulation. That's the way that they control overpopulation there, but they don't do a cull on human beings like we would do on deer because deer cannot self-regulate.
Gotcha. And then there's, I guess there's practical issues with the contraceptives that
Yes.
we've talked about. Okay. So I would like to switch it, staying on sort of name the trait. I'd like to switch it over to, you said you breed your own animals.
Yep. So I did regenerative and permaculture agriculture my entire life also. I currently live on a farm while I'm at college that does rotational grazing and permaculture farming. Um, Absolutely love it. I partner that with hunting and with wildlife conservation. Um, I use a Judy system of farming, which was developed out of Missouri, which partners with creating a sustainable ecosystem around your farm. That way, your farm also benefits nature.
Gotcha. Yeah. So again, I don't know how much I care about nature. I only care about nature in so much that it, increases well-being or reduces suffering. Um, yeah. So I mean, and there's just like a disagreement there. But
Yeah.
um, so would you, again? Well, would you farm humans on your regenerative farm?
No, just because human beings would not be a very efficient animal to farm in general.
Well, imagine
Because it,
imagine they were. Imagine humans were the tastiest and most nutritious animals, and
am I farming them as if I was also a human in this situation?
sure. I mean, we can play around. We can But yeah, I'll ask you first. Yeah, sure.
If I was a human farming humans, then no, because morally and ethically I disagree with that. But say I was a different species farming humans that view them in a different light, then I could see how that would be a possibility. Um,
Okay.
Unless we knew the intelligence. Now, if they're trait equalized humans and they're literally cows in human form, then I can understand it. But the way that we as a human species dictate importance for a lot of our species is intelligence. An example of this is how in England they have made it illegal to consume cephalopod and octopi because of their high intelligence. I think that is a standard that we have. With intelligence brings merit and value. Now, that's not always true, but with human beings in general, I would say that's also something to look at.
So, what about farming unintelligent humans?
Again, if I was a human farming unintelligent humans, disagree with it. If I was a different species farming unintelligent humans, I wouldn't have a say in it because I don't know. I've not been in that position. I could see why you would.
So, suppose you were a different an alien species, right?
Yeah,
So you're not human, you're a human, and as a human, um, you sort of are able to run tests, and you're able to sort of roughly estimate how intelligent humans are.
yeah.
Would you then farm the humans?
Depends on how intelligent they are.
Say
Like
like a three
if they're
a
at a
three
level
year
of
old
intelligence,
child.
again, it depends because that is also a big thing because a 3-year-old child can develop morality and ethics and the same spoken language as us. So again, it really depends.
What does it depend on?
I would say, like, if I've got a bunch of humans that are unintelligent, as you say, that are speaking the same language as me, that have a level of intelligence that is recognizable, and that they are able to identify with morals and emotions and establish ethics, then I would say no.
So I feel like a 2-year-old child wouldn't be able to do that.
Well, again, my mom has worked in early childhood education her entire life. 2 year old children have emotions clearly, like they are happy,
Yeah.
they're sad, stuff aggravates and perturbs them. They're able to speak the same language as us, and at 2 years old, you can communicate. Um, a 2 year old child has that sense of morality, as in, heck, when I was 2 years old, one of my family dogs passed away. I cried over that. That's showing emotions and showing morality. Um, as a 2 year old child, you establish those. Now, that's a lot different from being the intelligence of, like, let's say, an 8 month old child. But as a 2 year old, that's a very developmental part of your life. And you start to show signs of intelligence. And also, you have um, object permanence after that age. And that's another extreme sign of intelligence. Object permanence occurs at around 18 months of age, which is how we dictate intelligence in most of our animal species.
Gotcha. So you don't, do you think that any sort of human exists, whether it just be that they've been mentally disabled, or they're young enough, where they don't have that intelligence, where you would be okay with farming them?
I would say no, just because I don't think we have ever had on record a human being that does not have object permanence. That has also, to be clear, object permanence in the sense that, a blind person can't have the same object permanence as a person who can see normally. But object permanence is a phrase that can be applied to many different types of activities. And when it comes to object permanence, that is a major indicator of intelligence.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't. I'm struggling to understand your thought process here. Um, it so yeah, it seems like if you have, um if you're saying that we can farm animals because of their intelligence, and um it seems that a lot of humans exist with similar intelligences to that of animals, to farm animals. um
Well,
I don't
intelligence
see
is
where
more
you're.
than just, it's more than just, I guess I don't know the best term for this, but intelligence is more than just, borderline being smart. Because as human beings, because of how developed we are, we have more than just, smarts. We have emotional intelligence. We have morality. We have ethics. We have complex emotions. Um, that sets us apart from so many other species on this planet. Now, I'll tell you this: I've raised cattle, I've raised sheep. Sheep do not have complex emotions. Sheep do not have object permanence, and sheep do not have a sense of morality. I've seen where a sheep has passed away before due to a parasite overload, and the other sheep will come up and start eating it or attempting to, and going through the wool and picking out fibrous hairs off of one of their dead friends. That's insane if you think about that from a human scale, because the level of intelligence does not correlate because of how complex human intelligence truly is.
You're talking about, it sounds like you're talking about the type of intelligence, where like humans have the ability to think about abstract things. Um, there's this sort of human mind experience that doesn't exist with really any other animal. Um, but again, I would just say that that doesn't entirely exist with all other humans as well. There are humans that can't think of abstract things. There are humans that can't think about sort of morals in any real sort of way. Um, there are humans that really do, exhibit sort of very similar thought processes to, something like a pig or a cow.
Yeah,
Um, and I don't know. I really just don't know why you wouldn't, at least from in a vacuum, why you wouldn't be okay with farming those humans if you're okay with farming, um, the animals.
I think for one, like I said, it is even those human beings that you're discussing still demonstrate traits that are not able to be demonstrated by a cow or a pig. And even if they cannot, then still from a moral standpoint, as a human being, I recognize that even if they don't have the ability to, they're still a fellow human being. And through that sense, because we, as a complex human being, are able to establish our beliefs and um, our value system for other species on this planet, I would not be all right with it.
So okay, so you mentioned that there are traits um, that those humans would still have that would be lacking in the animals. So what are those traits?
I think a good one is, and we still don't truly understand it, but whenever we're talking about human beings, something to us that is not human or eerily human falls into the uncanny valley. Now, there's been a lot of work done on understanding the uncanny valley, um, and that goes back to a deep evolutionary thing with Homo sapiens in general, because it helps us to identify what are humans and what aren't. This was important for Homo sapiens on an evolutionary standpoint to help us distinguish from our species and Neanderthal. And that helps to add a greater, I guess, I don't know the proper word for it, sympathy for things that look like us because of the uncanny valley. Um, and so it's like a deep evolutionary root that we have. So if I'm a human being and I have another human being that looks like me, that is the same species as me, then I'm going to value that over something that is not the same species as me because of that deep evolutionary value.
But is that something that we ought to value, right? So if we have like something that looks like a human, um, but by like if you have something that looks like a human, and then you have something else that looks nothing like a human, it looks like some blob. Um, but by um, by killing the blob, you just cause like this extreme galactic amount of suffering. But by killing this human-looking like thing, it increases well-being by a galactic amount. Like what should you do?
Well, you see, in that standpoint, killing the human because you're not increasing suffering. But you're talking about the farming standpoint, and farming humans who are same traits as livestock, you're not decreasing suffering to livestock. All you're doing is increasing suffering in that viewpoint to something that looks like you. You see what I'm saying?
Well, why would you be increasing suffering to the thing that looks like you if it just has the same traits as the livestock?
Because
Like,
well, I'm not saying that you're not increasing suffering to livestock also. Like I said, in most factory farms, those animals do suffer. But like even on a permaculture farm, those animals have one bad day, so they don't suffer up to that one bad day. But it's the same thing with humans. Because of the uncanny valley, I would be more comfortable doing it to a different species than I would to human beings under any circumstance.
and that basically just comes down to the emotional, psychological.
Yes.
You look like a human. They look like a human.
Yes, and also the intelligence and the emotions they're able to emit. And if they cannot emit that, then the fact that we know they are human and I can identify through them because of that deep evolutionary root also ties back into that.
Okay, yeah. So I definitely disagree pretty strongly, but we can move on. I think we've kind
Yeah.
of run down the dialogue tree there. So
No, you're
um,
good.
it seems like we just sort of have a pretty big disagreement there. It sounds like we have a pretty large agreement on factory farming.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, in your view, what makes factory farming wrong?
Again, I'm a permaculture guy. I love sustainable agriculture. Factory farming is not sustainable agriculture. I'm all about limiting suffering. I'm all about conservation and well-being for animals. But I also consume meat. Um, as someone who consumes meat, I only ever want animals to have one bad day. I don't want them to come into this world um, and not have a chance to live a life that can, be more than just, fed to eat. My cattle and sheep that I raise are able to graze freely on pasture. They're able to live how that animal should live in a way that is natural. And I'm against things that are not natural, especially in that standpoint of factory farming. I want to do what's better for the animal. Factory farming is not.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we largely agree. The one thing I would disagree with is the whole one bad day. Um, like it seems like if you can make an argument that the animals on your farm or on similar farms are actually having a net positive experience, um, why would you rob them of more experience?
Because a lot of the animals you raise, once they hit a certain threshold, a peak, some would say, then naturally suffering will begin. For cattle, for instance, after you hit a certain age point for cattle, their bodies start to decline because of the weight that they have. That's why you have production lifespans in cattle, and then you have actual lifespans in cattle. A production lifespan is how long that individual can live on your farm in good health, and an actual lifespan is how long that individual can live. So I would prefer to let that individual live as long as it can on my farm in good health, and then prevent it from suffering as it starts to go downhill with age and consume the animal then, instead of having an animal on my farm and letting it suffer and die, and then consuming it after it has already suffered and died naturally.
Yeah. I feel like once that decline starts to happen, there's still quite a bit of well-being to be had. I had a chat with reasonable vegan, um, and I gave him sort of an idea of a farm that I would be in favor for as a vegan.
Yeah,
And the video was entitled like something like an ethical farm where we slaughter grandma. Um, so I have a dog,
yeah.
and I've had dogs growing up, and we all know what happens to dogs once they get old and sick. You put them down, and I think that's the ethical thing to do. Um, so similarly, I think you might be able to have a farm where you have a cow or a pig, and you go out and you play with them, and you take care of them, and it's net positive for both of you. But then once they get sick enough to where the suffering outweighs the well being of their life, then you could sort of euthanize them, and then you could um, use that. In the same way that I wouldn't have an issue eating a golden retriever after you gave it a good life, and then you euthanized it after it was suffering. I wouldn't have an issue with that with a cow. I don't think. The issue is
So,
that like I feel like usually they're killed way before that actually happens.
so here's the tricky thing with livestock is that time span after their production lifespan is up, where they can continue to live, can be so varied. And the point of that is, like my cattle, say the production lifespan on my cattle is 4 years, their average lifespan is 6. Um, the day after they turn 4, I can go out there and that cow be lame, which means that it could have snapped a tendon in one of its legs, and for that, that is a death sentence for a cow. The day after its production lifespan is up. And really, your production lifespan is up when you start to see the physical deterioration of that animal. Um, and I would much rather euthanize that animal and use that animal while one, that animal is still in, not constant pain and suffering, but also while that animal is still usable to meat. Because if you wait till the end of that cow's life, for one, that meat won't be eatable because cows will put on muscle throughout their entire life. That muscle will become more dense, and then you literally cannot consume that meat at the end of a cow's life most of the time. So it's kind of I would say the best meat in the middle spot for permaculture is that cow can limit its production lifespan on your farm. And once you see that cow start to deteriorate and start to be in pain, which is at the end of its production lifespan, then you euthanize, prevent it from going through that pain, but you can also use that meat.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're coming from a place of wanting of needing the meat. Um,
Yes, because like we said, as someone who consumes meat, I recognize I'm going to consume meat. And I want to do that in a way that creates the least harm and suffering. And so, by limiting the suffering an animal goes through, um, and while also recognizing I'm going to consume meat and not supporting factory farming, that in a sense creates a reality where I'm limiting suffering while also using that animal and not letting it go to waste, and then not having to support factory farming.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. So I'm just wondering, um, i- if there's some, you can there's some added well-being you can give to a cow, right? If you didn't eat meat, and why rob that just from like the simple pleasure of eating meat when you could just eat plants?
So for me, when it comes to just eating plants, a fun fact about me: I was vegan for 6 months whenever I was 17 years old, just because I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. And I did. I completed the 6 months that I wanted to be vegan, and then I continued to consume meat because to me, and with meat consumption, that is something to me that is honestly and truly just natural. Now, people will disagree with me, but human beings have done it for basically as long as human beings have been around. And do not consume meat is a new experiment in human mortality and in human ethical conduct. And so, for the people that are partaking in that experiment, I have immense respect for you because you're doing something that I cannot do, which is break away from the natural norm and not consume meat. And honestly, it's because I enjoy meat and I recognize as a human being, I am designed to enjoy meat. Uh, so I'm going to continue to eat meat, but I would like to do that in a way that limits harm the best way I can.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different things there. So number one, I don't think what's natural is what's good, right? It's the appeal to nature fallacy. Um, it seems like at least modern studies have shown us that you can be perfectly fine on a vegan diet, as far as
Yeah.
health goes. Um, but I wanted to bring up. So you mentioned that you kill your cows around 4 to 5 years old. But it seems like cows in captivity like will live 20 plus years. So what, am I missing something there, or
It
what's?
depends on the breed. So it depends on if you're talking about dairy cow or beef cow. So your most popular beef cow breeds, say a Black Angus, a Hereford, the production lifespan for those is around 6 years, and the average lifespan is around 8 because of rapid deterioration that occurs over time.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that, like I said, I'm an animal science major. We talk about that in my beef production class. Now, cattle can live to a lifespan of 18 to 20 years, but that is on a very intensive management plan um, that involves a complete grass fed diet, which can also cause diseases like mastitis in cattle and can also up the possibility for death rates. And it's also
Gotcha.
important. It's also important to consider what part of the world you're in. Here in southeastern Kentucky, where I'm at, and my farm specifically, we have very little flat land, and walking around on hillsides for cattle is an just a product for disaster. So after their production lifespan, when they start to deteriorate, it's very easy for them to slip and fall and break something. And most of the time, when a cow breaks a leg, that's a death sentence for a cow.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I can understand the argument. It's the same sort of thing as euthanizing golden retrievers when they start to get sick.
Yeah.
Um, so we have Jeremy in here saying that online sources say 10 to 12 for Black Angus. Where do you?
Again, that depends on where you're located at in the country. It also depends on the management style that you're implementing. So around here in southeastern Kentucky, production lifespan for Black Angus is 6 to 7 years. Most of the time it's around that 6, and then your average lifespan is usually around 8 years. That is because we are on a hillier terrain, so it's harder on the cattle's legs, so they deteriorate quickly over time. And also, it depends on the type of management plan you're doing. If it's completely grass fed, grain fed, you see where I'm getting at.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can get behind that. I mean, again, it sounds like you're more vegan than the majority of the world. And again, my main issue is factory farming, So
Yeah.
we may have disagreements we about hunting or the type of farming that you do. But I actually don't have huge issues with it. Like if I see someone eating meat from a factory farm, I sort of like think to myself like, oh gosh, dude, like.
Yeah.
But if I see someone eating like hunted meat, I sort of I'm like, all right, you know, we just kind of just disagree.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So when it comes to ending factory farming, what do you think is the best way about doing that?
Well, like I said, most people are going to continue to eat meat. And I think the best way for us to move forward from it would be to one, embrace permaculture systems. And also, as a hunter, it's very controversial for me to say this or believe this, but synthetically produced meat is going to be a major thing for the future. And I think that's going to be a major way to feed people. And I am not opposed to it. But I also recognize that hunting is still going to be important. So I think it's going to be a mixture of those three: synthetically created meat, permaculture agriculture, and sustainable hunting practices are probably the best way forward.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the like lab grown meat. In fact, there was two companies in California that recently got FDA approval, which I
For
think is just
chicken, yep,
yeah, which is fantastic. So I'm gonna definitely really be supporting that. I feel like it's like the Apple II of computers um to meat. Yeah,
yeah,
it's revolutionary. It's gonna be fantastic. And I wouldn't have a huge issue with people supporting hunting. I think there's arguments to be made that it reduces animal suffering. Um, I would have bigger issues with the type of farming that you do, but I wouldn't say huge issues.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so it sounds like we largely agree on a lot of areas. I think the biggest disagreement for me would just be valuing the value of nature.
yeah. No, I agree with you on that. I think our value of nature is very different. For me, nature is something that I think the world needs, even with the bad and the suffering that comes out of nature. I enjoy the good that comes out of it. And I mean, nature in a sense is natural. And so to go against what's natural to me is something that's not worth, the sacrifice.
Gotcha. Um, so Jeremy's been pretty goaded as far as the comments he's making.
Yeah.
Um, but he had a, sort of a statement that I thought was really interesting. So he says, broken leg would be a death sentence for a dog too, based upon the cost benefit analysis. Um, as it uh, as it is a product rather than a family member. Um,
So I understand what he's saying from that, but also you have to think a cow is a lot larger than a dog, and it's a lot harder to do veterinary work on a cow than a dog. Now, a dog, you can put that leg in a cast and it will heal up naturally. If a cow gets a broken leg, and I've seen friends that have done work on some really expensive cattle, um, and they don't want to euthanize that animal, you have to put this animal in a suspension harness to take weight off that leg for up to 4 months while it heals. Because if it puts weight on that leg at all, because it is such a heavy animal, then that leg will just re-break. So no cast can fix that. And so veterinary bills for that tend to be upwards of $60,000 to $70,000.
Gotcha. I think his comment had less to do with the leg in and of itself, and more about the topic of um, by having it by having the product be the death of the animal. You're sort of um, yeah, you're gonna be more focused on that rather than like um,
Yeah, I think the point he missed there was we're trying to prevent the broken leg from even occurring. So cattle, for the majority of their life, will walk around fine on hillsides, and if they fall, they can get right back up. But once we start to see that deterioration in their health before they break a leg, is when we will go ahead and euthanize that animal, because then we're preventing them from suffering because they're already going to have pain in their joints. We're going to see them start to develop laminitis and mastitis as they get older. And so we're preventing that suffering from occurring.
would you apply that to so this is actually something so I would apply that to humans, where I'm okay with like assisted suicide and things like this.
That's a loaded
So
question. I understand it.
would you apply the same, I guess, logic to humans as well?
That's a very loaded question. I would say it's very circumstantial, but I understand why it is legal. I'm not completely opposed to it. I would say if you were doing kind of like if you're doing a diagram, I would be in the middle, slightly leaning towards the favor, just because I think if the individual is making that choice specifically, um, especially if it's for the betterment of their health and to prevent suffering, then I understand it completely.
Okay, so I mean, it seems like you're consistent with cows to humans in that sense. So,
Yeah,
um, okay, sounds good. Do you have any questions for me?
buddy. Thank you so much for letting me come on. We've had some good conversations, and I feel like we've talked about a whole lot. So I'll go ahead and hop off for the night. And buddy,
Uh,
it's been really great.
yeah, sounds good. Before you hop off, do you want to just, I guess, reiterate where people can find you?
Of course. So if y'all want to see the content we put out and be involved, my TikTok account is named hunting_Appalachia. Same thing on screen right here, just the underscore in between them. Um, like I said, we usually do daily or almost daily live streams. Now I'll be on vacation next week, going down to do some conservation work in Florida. It's going to be a lot of fun. So there might be a lull if y'all are just tuning in, but I'm still going to try to put out content. But Hunting Appalachia, we'd love to have you all there. We accept people of all kinds. We promise to be nothing but respectful, and we just love sharing viewpoints. We also have the Hunting TikTok community Discord. Again, welcomes people of all kinds. Great community. We'd love to have you in there also. And we appreciate y'all a whole lot.
Sweet. Yeah, it was nice having you.
Of course, buddy, thank you so much for having me on. You're welcome in my streams anytime. And I look forward to having more conversations with you.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to go on your stream. The big issue is I don't have 1,000 followers on TikTok,
Buddy, we'll figure
which
out a
is a
way.
bummer.
If we
But I'd
got to
love to come on.
FaceTime
Yeah.
and broadcast it or whatever, we'll figure out a way.
Yeah, send me an email.
All right, I will. All right, have a good day, man. Or a good
Thanks.
evening, I should say.
Yep. All right, guys. I think I'll stay on for a little bit if anyone has any questions or if they want to hop on and chat. I apologize about running through the comments. I was trying to sort of focus on the conversation, and I would sort of glance over at the comments. Um, so it's I don't have that ability to focus on two things at once. Um, but I guess I'll respond to a couple different comments here. So uh, Dave London says we love cats. We need to save cats. Yeah. So talking about hunting feral cats, it's good for the cats, good for the other animals. So if you love cats, you probably ought to you probably ought to uh, hunt feral cats. Jeremy's eating some tacos. What kind of tacos are we eating here? So Beyond Beef, fantastic. I actually bought a case of Beyond Burgers today, so I'm gonna pound some Beyond Burgers later tonight. I so here's a question: Beyond versus Impossible. Uh, I think Impossible tastes more like meat, but I think Beyond tastes better. I'm a fan of Beyond, especially I've spent quite a bit of money on Carl's Jr. Beyond Burgers. It was a very interesting conversation. I largely agree with him in a lot of different aspects. Um, it got when we got to the name the trait, it got a little bit dicey. I think. I think he was. I mean, he was arguing in good faith. I think. I don't think he. I don't think. Yeah, he was arguing in bad faith or anything like that. But yeah, the name the trait aspect was really interesting for sure. Carl's Jr. uses real cheese, so I take the cheese off. No cheese, no mayo, and then I add guacamole. Delicious. Something that he seemed to do was he kept going to. So I would ask him about like hypothetical issues, like what happens in a vacuum, and it seems like he kept going to the practical side of things, which is again a separate issue. If we're trying to test the values, right? Um, then we test them in a vacuum, and then we can sort of then we can start branching out into like how does that work practically. But yeah, I'd love to talk with him again. It was great. Jeremy, did you want to come on for a second? Here, I'll send a link, and you can click on it if you want, or not. But yeah, the idea of hunting feral cats, um, it's obviously something that vegans support, at least the cat type that he's talking about. And that's kind of fun, to be honest, because it's like that seems like something it would be very anti-vegan, sort of intuitively. Uh, it's like, yeah, we should capture cats and murder them. It's like, but when it comes to animal suffering, it seems like the one of the best things we could do to reduce it. Jeremy's on his last taco. Very good, very good. Maybe dude, maybe I'll get some. Maybe we can do drunk stream again. But I do work early tomorrow. I might still do it. What's up? We're gonna do another drunk stream.
Yeah, anytime, man. I've got to try to get myself to where I can. I've got to be up at 8 a.m. on Sunday for Akash.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll.
On Unreasonable
I'm excited
Vegan.
for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Good spicy tacos. That's good.
Nice.
Yeah, that guy was interesting. You know, one of the main like themes that that comes up a lot, probably is going to come up a lot with Reasonable Vegan and the kind of like conversations we're having with non-vegans and that role that we're sort of playing in the vegan sphere is you know, the people who work with these animals, and I think, yeah, he's still exploiting animals. They know so many more details, right? They can just kind of spam you with detailed facts, right?
Yeah, we kind of have to just sort of talk about like the philosophy behind it, but they kind of just throw out all these things, and I'm like, I don't know if that's true, but if it is, I guess maybe.
I mean,
Yeah,
normally you want to trust people who have hands-on expertise, but if you think about other moral areas, you wouldn't be like, like whoever you could say, yeah, I'm gonna like, I'm gonna trust this serial killer about how little the victims suffer because he's actually out there doing it, and I don't have that firsthand experience.
sure, sure.
I'm this naive, anti killing hitchhikers person who has watched some movies and like maybe read about it in some books, but you know the people that are actually doing it know the know the details so much more than me, and sometimes they kind of talk that way, animal farmers, as if there's this subtext of vegans who haven't ever worked in those industries being naive and inexperienced. But how are you going to become experienced without without participating in the thing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That's
Yeah,
kind of frustrating.
I like that the example of I'm an anti-killing hitchhikers, but I wouldn't know because it's like I don't go out and kill hitchhikers, so I'm not experienced in the field. Yeah.
I think we still have a damn good reason to be very dubious of serial killers' claims about what hitchhikers experience and when they choose to kill them and various other things like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Even though they have more experience than we do, we have kind of common sense and knowledge of human psychology that gives us a good reason to cast doubt on those claims. I think too much of what he was saying sounded way too convenient. He most of the things he had mentioned his enjoyment. He mentioned things like quality of the meat, but he also mentioned what he enjoys and people who enjoy hunting and things like that.
Yeah.
Texas got this kind of aurochs reintroduced because there were a lot of people who enjoyed hunting it and things like this. And so it seems pretty convenient when the kind of things that so many people have selfishly enjoyed just happen to correspond to these ecology-based moral arguments that you can come up with. And that's not maybe that's not entirely fair because he's opposed to factory farms and things like that. But I also wonder whether these guys, go to pig slaughterhouse vigils and things like that.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't want to get into fights with vegans, but maybe they could probably coordinate with the vegan organizers to go on different days and do the same thing, stand in front of the trucks and tend to the pigs who have never known anything but suffering, and hold up pictures of what breeding sows experience. They don't seem to be doing that a lot.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you don't see regenerative farmers going out and protesting factory farms, even though they claim to be against them. I wonder what that reasoning is. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and well, I mean, I think part of it is, I may talk smack about some vegans, especially historically in the same context, but there's this important sociological distinction, especially in religion, of evangelical movements and evangelical groups versus like what
Protestant?
esoteric. No, like some religions want to spread the religion to the world because they
Oh,
believe
gotcha.
it's the one right message that
Yeah.
humanity needs. And other religions, like Hasidic Jews, for example, are
It's
cool
more
with
individual and keeping it to yourself.
keeping
Yeah.
their community as pure and as cohesive, but small, right? They don't mind that it stays small, but they want it to be pure and have sharp borders. And
Yeah.
so so it seems like regenerative farming, I mean, it's not something that could possibly scale to feed humanity, right? And so it has this like esoteric kind of like small community sort of vibe to it.
Sure. Yeah.
But a lot of vegans are that way too, you know, especially I
Yeah.
think probably a generation or two ago, that were fine kind of being in their bubble, keeping their vegan bubble, and so they were cool with adding in like all different kinds of health rules, you know. If you go to this kind of old school vegan restaurant, it's sort of designed to jump on any number of like health and environment bandwagons, right? And
Yeah.
and have very strange food that wouldn't appeal to most people, but it appeals to people who are like well established within this like cultural niche community, right? But you know, I'm the kind of vegan who um wants vegan fast food places that taste just like what people are used to at McDonald's and Pizza Hut and stuff.
Yeah. Same.
So it
Although
can, yeah.
yeah, these days I've actually sort of grown to like the more traditional vegan food more. The issue is that I mean I still like the you know the fast food stuff, but I mainly like the fast food stuff just out of convenience.
Mm-hmm.
It's fantastic that I can grab a Beyond Burger or an Impossible Burger. I get 2 Impossible Burgers from Burger King for $7.
Oh, that's so nice.
So
I had my first one ever when I had a flight transfer in Hawaii. And you know, I don't know if you know, but you could probably guess everything is super expensive in Hawaii. So just the burger by itself, no combo or anything, cost me $13.
oh wow, yeah, that's pretty gnarly.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. I'd had Impossible Meat before from the store. Just like you said, it tastes, from what I remember of actual ground up cow Impossible, tastes closer to that, but Beyond is way more delicious. Beyond is amazing.
It's tastier. Yeah, I'm a big fan.
All that coconut oil. But yeah, you know, I wasn't gonna say like yeah, that there is this kind of divide in veganism, and it's really important for us to understand that like that it's never going to be the case that most people are weird or are willing to be weird, are willing to like stand out and eat really different things. That's the only way that would ever possibly be the case is with like a lot of genetic engineering, kind of eugenics to like create different personality types in people biologically. That's the only way. Unless you change the raw material of humanity, it's always going to be the case that most people are going to value sort of normalcy, you know, what they grew up with, what they're used to. They're going to stick with the similar familiar foods. They're going to want their holidays to have the same kind of foods that they had before, you know. Sometimes you can get like sushi introduced into Western culture over the course of 30 or 40 years, but or tacos or something, but you know, you can't get most people to be like the kind of personality types that kind of naturally go vegan. in the 70s or even today, you know. So the most important thing for us to promote as vegans is normal, familiar options that
Yeah,
don't involve the animal abuse.
which is why this lab grown meat that just got FDA approval is fantastic.
Yeah, it's gonna, you know, I don't know. I don't know if they're gonna ultimately be able to tweak the meat to make it less unhealthy as well, while still
Well,
tasting familiar to people. But I mean, the only downside is that it won't do. If it's exactly the same, it won't do anything about the huge public health crisis of sad diets.
yeah, but I
Uh,
mean, there's the thing is like Beyond Burgers and Impossible Burgers aren't the healthiest
yeah,
either, right? And
right. That's
there's
right.
some pleasure from
Uh-huh.
making bad health decisions. Um,
Yeah, I'm very happy about this approval,
yeah,
and I hope, you know, one of the things is like whatever can get big the big food manufacturing companies like Tyson to sever their ties with the animal ag industries. You know, that break and the kind of implications for politics, that seems like it's going to be the huge thing when the when the processed food producers start saying, we don't need you guys anymore, we can make things that will taste familiar to people with this other method, and then they take their lobbying and money away from all the subsidies of animal production. Then I think that could really change our societies a lot. Maybe
it would be
lab
great.
meat could do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Apple II to computers of when it comes
Right.
to meat. Yeah,
The Apple II. Yeah, that's a great analogy. Like,
I stole that from my old creative writing teacher. I actually found out that they got approval through him. He messaged me on Facebook, um, and yeah, he's like, it's the Apple II to meat, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Yep.
and my dad got an Apple IIc when I was young. I think it probably cost him $5,000 or something. Yeah.
Yeah, now you can buy I remember back I was maybe 17 or 18 or so. I bought for $90. I bought a they had these Windows Windows tablets. It was a tablet. It was like a 7-inch tablet, and it had Windows 8 fully installed on it. And I bought it for $90. And I could, go on Word and I could do Excel and I could even play Minecraft on it. It's only
Uh-huh.
$90. That's so crazy.
Yeah. Hopefully, you know, technology can move at that kind of speed. Human culture can't. Yeah. I guess with somebody I should talk one of these days about, you know, how I am in support of changing the raw material of society. I am in support of heavy genetic engineering, and
Yeah, that's a pretty dicey topic there.
Bentham's
Um,
bulldog Matthew is too, I believe. And one of the things that annoys me the most is this historical association between supporting and
Nazism, yeah,
improving the gene pool and Nazis, totalitarianism, you know,
yeah,
white supremacy or racism or whatever. And it just doesn't make any sense, because to me it's just like it's just the counterpart to education, and all of those evil movements supported education too, their own form of education. But
sure,
nobody says we can we can't try to change the future generations through education because the Nazis wanted to use education. or the Bolsheviks did or whatever. That's
Yeah, a lot of the great medicines we use came from Nazi scientists. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, that I think that I mean, I'm not saying that we're anywhere close to this point, but at some point in like futuristic terms, um, having a world with more happiness and less harm is going to require, as one of its components, developing methods for having people who are predisposed to help increase happiness in others and not harm others unnecessarily. Because I think it's just very clear that people do vary in their individual predispositions to that, and to caring about others and doing things that are not harmful to lots of other people. And I don't see any actual reason to, like, legitimate ethical reason to take it off the table. And the sort of popular reasons that people reject it are just, I think, nonsensical, really knee jerk and unfair.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just the psychological, just because of how historically it's been tied to moral atrocities. But yeah, it in and of itself, it's not a bad thing, and it could possibly be a very good thing.
Yeah, it seems compatible with just sort of any like ethical, moral, political system that you favor. You know, there doesn't seem to be any reason why, like, if you want to make sure that all, racial and ethnic groups are like adequately represented, you can just have whatever kind of affirmative action sort of quotas or rules. I don't have any great problem with that. If you care about like voluntarism, like people choosing and rights, then you can try to convince people through persuasion, like we're doing with veganism now, and it could be subject to democratic oversight, like so many other things are. So I don't see any inherent connection to totalitarianism. It's just like the main difference between altering the genes of future generations and trying to educate future generations to be different is that we have scientific reason to think that the former would work much better than the latter. The education doesn't seem to be very good at changing the fundamental building blocks that different people already had, the different students already bring when they go into the school in the first place. This is I'm not a regenerative farmer, but I am a teacher of many years, and this is me speaking with hands-on experience. You don't change the kids that much. It's more like providing a fertile soil where their own individual seeds can grow into the kind of plant that they are.
Yeah, I would agree. I am very much, I guess, like a materialist, where I think, like, everything is pretty much just physical. So yeah, if you're born with a certain brain chemistry or a certain genome or something that yeah, and if we could alter it to so people have better brain chemistries and better, or they're more likely to increase well-being. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, the fact that people are so unwilling to even start by, like, getting rid of extremely painful, debilitating genetic disorders.
Yeah, well, it kind of goes back to like people have some weird fetish with nature that like nature is what's good and it needs to just sort of take its course, which is absurd.
Yeah, not even trying to get rid of Huntington's disease, and our population is just so crazy.
Yeah.
Multiple sclerosis and stuff. It's like I don't. Yeah, there is this. It's more than just a status quo bias, I think, because it goes really deep. People get really upset and start making, comparisons, Frankenstein or Island of Dr. Moreau or whatever,
Yep.
about what's just a very commonsensical, proposal to stop future people who would experience really extreme suffering. Yeah. And even though, I'm generally a pro-natalist, I think in most of these cases you're not going to be like having one less person have a chance to live in the world. You're going to have a different person born instead who doesn't have these conditions.
Yeah, it's like with Peter Singer talks about with like replacement with his like abortion argument. Which I agree with, by the way. I think yeah.
Bentham's Bulldog has a good post on on replacement of experiences against the with the non-replaceability theorem or whatever, or
Yeah.
what did he call it?
And by the way, I'm still waiting for that convo with him and Reasonable Vegan.
Oh, nice.
He had it. Well, he had it scheduled. Like Reasonable Vegan and Matthew were going to talk, and then I guess they have to reschedule.
Oh yeah, it's called the separateness of persons objection. Yeah. So this kind of broad objection to consequentialism that you can't compare, can't do a cost benefit analysis of happiness and suffering when there are different individuals involved, because supposedly there's no common denominator, there's no common point of comparison when the experiencers are different. You're familiar with that, right? That's like
yeah, vaguely. I'm
it's like
scrolling
a common bad argument.
Yeah. I'm scrolling through Bentham's Bulldog. I need to read his blog more because it's when I have read it, it's been very good. I actually subscribe to his Substack. But yeah, I really need to read more of it because I think he's one of the best like arguers for utilitarianism out there, or even just ethics in general and philosophy. Yeah, I think he's very good.
Yeah, this is a really good, really interesting post. Some really smart philosophers have taken this separateness of persons objection seriously, and there's kind of a lot to unpack in it. But I mean, some of the things that you can just kind of say common sense about it is, we need the ability to compare across persons in the organization of our society. I frequently talk about how you can't have a deontologist in charge of traffic policy or whatever.
Yeah.
Like society-wide regulation, safety regulations, where there's always got to be trade-offs involving lots and lots of potential events happening to lots and lots of different people, right? So if you really took that seriously, then you would just spin your wheels. You wouldn't be able to that organize anything in society, because trade-offs across separate persons are so pervasive, right? And then the other kind of thing that it leads to is the is thinking about whether like persons or experiences are primary. It confirms for me that the kind of Parfit view that experiences are primary, and a self or a person is just like enough overlapping like strands of experience that are connected over time or in some other kind of causal way, and that's what a person means. So it doesn't make sense to me to have persons as like an empty vessel, like they're just individuals and then experiences get poured into it, because persons are chains of experiences to begin with. So when people say when people say you can't compare experiences, like positive and negative experiences across different individuals, it just doesn't fundamentally make sense, because when I'm talking about the world being better because there are positive experiences in it, I'm seeing the experiences as primary. Like the happy moments or the happy stretches of time is the primary thing in the universe. And so when I say if we did something, it would increase happiness and that would be better, I'm saying the universe would be better. I'm talking about the quantity of this certain kind of experience in the universe. So the question is like, better for whom? Better for this person, better for that person. It's like it's not even what I'm talking about. Like we can, of course, yeah. Of course, we could say the world could be like better for you and worse for me. But when I say morally better, I mean that there's sort of there's more goodness in the universe.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that because I'm not sure if I follow.
Whoa. Okay. So
some barkage.
I guess I think that the way in which things can be better or worse for an individual is not the moral sense of goodness or badness. If that makes sense. Like the moral sense of something being good is not for me or for you. The moral sense of an action being good is that it made more good experience exist in the universe. I mean, relative to bad experience, like took away bad experience and or increased good experience.
Okay, and so it's you said something earlier about how like we're not like an empty vessel, then experiences are poured into it.
Yeah.
That we are part of the experience, that we are the experience.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I can get behind that.
Yeah, talking about persons being there and then having experiences put into them sounds like talking about organisms and then having cells put into them. Like you had to have the dog be there before you could fill that existing dog with cells to then have it be a cell-filled dog. That doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
The dog is just made of cells.
So it's not. I mean, so I agree that experiences aren't like mind independent. Is that what you're trying to get at? Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
Experiences are not mind independent, but I don't know if I can say that they couldn't be. I'm saying that minds are organizations of experiences, not separate things that then can hold experiences or be linked to experiences, but minds just are made up of experiences. Like, different kinds of matter is made up of quarks or whatever.
Gotcha. Okay.
But so that's why from that perspective, like the consequentialist judgment that a certain act would be morally wrong is not it would make the world a worse place for this individual or this individual or this individual. I mean, a lot, like we can identify that sometimes, when you eat chicken, like it's the chickens that the harm is being done to. Maybe the slaughterhouse workers too, a little bit, right? But the like the essence, like the real reality of saying that it's morally wrong to go and buy chickens in the supermarket is that is a property of the universe. It's that more negative experience is being caused to exist in the universe. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's just all there is. Like, and yeah, those very, very negative experiences are organized into the selves of many individuals, the selves of chickens, right? But the chickens aren't a thing that holds the suffering. It's like the experience that's mostly horrible suffering is what's making up the selfhood of those chickens. And so what's bad about these kind of acts is just that it's putting badness into the universe. Yeah. This is like drunk stream, even though this is the first beer I've had today.
Yeah.
And it's just a Coors. It's like super light.
Yeah, you're making me think. I haven't I need to get more into Parfait for sure.
It's very dense.
You-
It's a very dense book.
There's been a couple of times where I've tried to get into Parfait and I just my brain turns off and I go and I start watching TikTok instead.
It's pretty wild. You got to like read it like once sober and once drunk and once high on marijuana.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
I don't know what to say. Parfait was a rare genius, the most important philosophers, and apparently they say he was a guy who started off normal and grew more into weirdness. I heard like either Richard Chappell or Matthew writing about that. I saw that, but I already knew that reputation from talking to philosophers when I was a student, that he just like got so lost into his philosophy that his personal life just started to fall away, and he just embraced the weirdness.
That seems common with a lot of philosophers. I mean, Nietzsche was, of course, he felt ill, but at the same time, like, turns into his I guess sister just selling tickets to watch people watch him drool as he like is saying wild things, and yeah.
Yikes. So who you talking to soon?
Who am I talking to? So I'm talking to, what's his name? It is a non-vegan that Carson recommended I talk to. Eric Thompson.
Okay. Yeah.
It looks like he had a. I'm talking with him tomorrow, at 5 p.m. Utah time,
Is that
and
the
hopefully,
virtue ethics guy?
I'm not sure. I know he did a
Okay.
chat with Carson, but I know nothing about this person,
Uh,
so I'll kind of be coming into it like a little bit a little naked, but yeah, I have. It's been hard to. I've been wanting to watch his stream, but I haven't got around to. Work's been crazy. In fact, I hope I'll be able to make it on time because we have this big job that we're doing. This big condominiums. I'm a window cleaner, so
oh,
yeah. So I'm gonna have to like rush back here, and hopefully I'll make it. I might be a little bit late, but looks like Carson's here, so
hey,
he's rewatching it.
hey, man. Yeah, I'm waking up late these days. And do what I can to be up at 8 a.m. for a
Yeah.
class. I will be up, but I'll be brain dead for a little while. Hopefully,
No,
get some coffee into me.
I am the infamous late shower to pretty much everywhere I've worked, which is not good on my resume. But in fact, I have been suspended without pay from 2 different jobs. For showing up late. Yeah, so I gotta nip that in the butt. But
When you do stuff that you're working with the crew that needs all the people to be playing their part, kind of at the same time.
yeah, I mean, basically, if I show up late, then we're gonna be late to our first job. So it is kind of immoral to show up late, but you don't think like that when you're tired and you're trying to wake up and you're staring at the wall contemplating life.
Uh-huh. It's hard when you're just naturally more like a night owl, or your circadian rhythm starts to get like later and later every day. I think the world is not structured for people like us, I guess. And I know, yeah, some people actually do like fight through it, and they actually, do just have whatever like willpower and conscientiousness. But there's a lot of other people that just don't understand the problem.
Yeah.
They just say just make sure you get up at 6 a.m. like a few days in a row, and then it'll just be normal for you. No, it won't. No, it won't.
So what happens with me is I'm bipolar, so I'll have like manic states where I won't sleep. So I can wake up early. I'll wake up at 3 a.m. or whatever. And after sleeping 2 hours or 1 hour,
Clean the whole house.
and I'm just like show up to work early. But then once like the depression comes, then it's like, not only are you dealing with this depression, but you're dealing with like lack of sleep as well. So it's so hard to wake up in the mornings for sure. Hey, but I've been able to make it work somehow, right? Like, I mean, I show up late, but I still get a paycheck, and I haven't been fired or anything. So
yeah, it's really important to like live your life frugally enough that you're never worried about having enough in the bank to buy food and whatever.
yeah, I'm so bad with money that like I always feel like I'm sort of like a minimalist, like this Epicurean sort of like, but at the same time, all my money runs away, right? And like even to the point like I don't have a bed. I sleep on the floor. I have roommates. But then yeah, all my money goes away, and then, like I have a ton of credit card debt. I think a lot of it comes down to it comes down to the small things. It's fast food. It's stuff like that. Yeah, but we're making it work. I think everybody's poor these days.
You just need a college degree in anything, and then you can go teach English in Korea and make enough that you save, like, have an apartment provided for you by the school, and
Yeah, that'd be awesome, man.
save like 40-50% of your salary without much trouble. When you got loans to pay off, that's credit card debt. That puts a hamper on it a little bit, but
Yeah, for sure.
like a way to do it. But it's not really important, like what subject it's in or how prestigious the university is. That matters a little, but not so much. You can just figure out a way to crank a bachelor's degree out as fast as possible.
Yeah, I think the higher the degree, the more the prestigious degree, the school matters. But yeah, as far as bachelor's, probably doesn't matter as much.
Yeah, just get it in like the easiest / most interesting subject.
I started school. I haven't gotten my associates yet, but I started getting my associate's degree with, philosophy as a major, of course. And I did one semester, and I want to go back, but I haven't paid my first semester's tuition yet, and my credit isn't good enough to get a loan for it. So, I guess I could try it, but I'll figure something out. But yeah, that is the goal. So I'll probably go back to school. I don't know, maybe in the fall or the spring. I kind of have to do this thing where, you have to, like, I'll go to school, all my money will go away, then I have to go work, get the money back, and then I can go back to school. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
So,
I was when I was about your age. I went to 4-year university and I dropped out after like just short of 3 years, and then I worked for an internet service provider that someone I knew was starting up kind of in the early days when internet popularity was catching on with normal people.
yeah.
And I went to Washington, D.C. as an intern and for a think tank. And then I drove trucks, hauled tomatoes during the summer tomato season for a couple of years. Built up that money and felt like, wow, I've got this pretty large amount of money, and then just didn't work for a while and like blew through that money, the tomato truck money, till I finally went back to school. Yeah, it feels like you're struggling with your kind of own conscientiousness, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And then you get these times when you think, like, if I would have just done everything the most boring, conventional way right from the outset.
Yeah. Absolutely. My whole school career has been extremely wild. Ton of regrets. Yeah, if I was parenting myself, right, my younger self, I would have. So I dropped out. We dropped out of school in 2nd grade, to be homeschooled, which essentially means, you wake up, recite the preamble, read some scriptures, and then you go and play video games all day. Or me was playing piano all day, and then yeah. So I eventually went back to public school and high school, and so I didn't even learn anything about like evolution until sophomore year of high school.
Mhm.
So it was a huge I don't know what's going on, but and then I actually dropped out of high school again because I got convinced by some crazy libertarian public education is bad. So and my parents were in the same boat. They've always been against public education. So I dropped out of high school to be an unschooler, junior year or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I stayed to do all like the fun classes. So I took like theater and choir and creative writing. Um, and then I legally sort of graduated high school just because there's some like loophole in Utah law where you just have your mom sign a paper that says you graduated, and then like you're legally graduated because Utah's very pro like homeschooling.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I'm essentially both a like elementary school dropout and a high school dropout,
Mm.
and I wish I just stayed in. Well, I guess there were some positive aspects of homeschooling. I think it helped me learn how to learn and things like that. But um, no, at least high school, I definitely should have stayed all the way in high school.
This the friendships that you have that you don't even realize when you're with these same people every day. It's really nice that I have high school friends. Most of my best friends through the band. Um, after all these years, seeing them on Facebook, and it's kind of like with family too, with extended family, having these bonds to people that have really different thoughts from you, really different personalities from you in a lot of ways. But you have the shared history and other things that bind you together. It gives you a sane perspective on things
Yeah,
versus this atomized individualism of people who maybe drop out, maybe they kind of have to separate themselves from their family quite a lot, but they end up kind of getting thrown into a big city with nothing like fixed, like no relationship that's like given to you or pre-existing, just everything you're trying to invent on your own. That's I've known a lot of people like that over the years. It's kind of hard to imagine.
yeah. It can get pretty complicated and yeah, it's interesting for sure.
And um, so I look forward to, what's the guy's name again? The
The
non-vegan guy,
Eric,
Eric.
yeah,
Did he
Eric
bring up
Thompson.
any topic in particular that you guys are
Let's
focused
see.
on?
So I'm gonna read through. So we had a talk scheduled, and then I rescheduled it because I was sick. Um, what were we gonna talk about? Well, talking about veganism. So maybe I can. Yeah, that's essentially just
Yeah.
generally about veganism. Yeah. So I'll probably just try and establish what his values are, and then see if it aligns with.
Yeah. So
But
Akash is going to ask me about ethical consequentialism and about a lot of specific topics, like including abortion and like criminal law and other stuff. Like I talked with Carson about that one time.
yeah,
Uh, the difference between morality and legality. I wonder if there's anything that you would want me to bring up with somebody who's curious about consequentialism, like what aspect do you think people might want to hear about? Where's Carson's? Looking for his email right now.
I always like the idea of like how consequentialism ties into um, deontology. It's like um, you could be you could maybe be a consequentialist, um, and just say that good consequences are those that increase um, protection of rights.
Yeah, I point that out a lot, or I argue that a lot, but I think it's just straightforward that wanting like rights violations to be minimized like across the world, such as, you know, most of the vegan activists who
Mm-hmm.
say they're abolitionists or liberationists or whatever, that's just not deontology. Like, I know
Yeah,
framing it in terms of rights, it sounds like it's not traditional utilitarianism, but it's still a consequences oriented view when you're even if the consequences you're trying to minimize are rights violations or you're trying to maximize respect for rights or whatever. Because deontology is only about rules, restrictions on your own behavior, rules that you shouldn't violate, that you have a duty not to violate.
yeah,
And so, yeah, deontologists shouldn't care about changing what other people are doing in the world. Or if they do it, then it's just kind of like it's not their obligation. It's some kind of, sometimes I call it extra credit. They think being an activist and like saving animals from harm that isn't your fault or that you're not doing is just this kind of less important extra credit. So anybody who thinks that shutting down the hell of factory farms is a crucial goal is already on the page of ethical consequentialism from my perspective.
sure.
It doesn't matter that whether they frame it in terms of rights or in terms of like suffering and lost happiness. I think that the phrasing in terms of rights is a lot of the time just it's like a handy, useful paraphrase of you know, a whole big bundle of negative consequences. So they think that they're arguing against consequentialism, but they're really not. They're really just in favor of using certain kind of terminology and not using other kind of terminology. And they think that sometimes it's just because they think that individual consequentialists like Peter Singer are not fully vegan, that there's going to always be this slippery slope towards industry welfareism and just making slightly bigger cages and things like this.
Yeah,
So what they actually are arguing for is a stronger, stricter consequentialism. And they're mistakenly calling that deontology. I think that's what's going on with Joey Carbstrong for sure.
yeah. I love Joey to death, but he annoys me when he talks about ethics.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. He's a very strict consequentialist. And he doesn't know it.
well, I mean, I think he'll watch some like a handful of like vegan gains videos or something, or maybe like ask yourself videos, and then yeah, and I feel like, you know, maybe he should do that more, because I think ask yourself specifically has a I think he has a pretty decent case for, I guess, what would be a like threshold deontology. But I honestly, I feel like he would call himself a consequentialist as well. Um,
You know who's really great on articulating the difference and why the consequential side is right also is a total veganic futurism.
you
You
know,
listen-
I think he commented on a video of my old channel. If I'm thinking of the right person, he makes these really like cinematic,
Yeah,
well
the
done
quality of
videos.
his videos are great. Yeah, he doesn't make that many of them because he's spending a lot of time on each one. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to chat with this guy.
Yeah, if we could get him into this circle, that would be great. I'd love to talk with him too. And,
I feel like he's got 716 subscribers, so I feel like we could get into it.
yeah,
like,
the proportion of, I mean, he's fairly new, but the quality of his production compared to the size of his channel is just amazing, right?
yeah. Did you watch speaking of quality channels, did you watch Humane Hancock's video with Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Oh God, yeah, I managed to make it through a large portion of it. I can't stand. I cannot bear the sound of Neil deGrasse Tyson's voice. I mean, veganism is kind of it's like the tip of the iceberg to just what a bad, unfair reasoner and obnoxious person he is overall.
Yeah, I wasn't like that annoyed with Neil deGrasse Tyson like before this video. I mean, I heard some really silly stuff he said about veganism, but I was just like, yeah, he's just some public figure that says general interesting things about space or whatever. But yeah, watching this interview was, oh my gosh, and he wouldn't let Jack get like really anything in. He just kept interrupting him and just like yeah, it was so funny. And Vegan Games brought this up where he's like Neil deGrasse Tyson is like starts trying to mansplain whataboutism, but his entire like stick is what about mice in your house? Like he is whataboutism. Yeah.
Yeah, he kept coming out with all these like instrumental facts about the role of animals and trees in the ecosystem, but it's like it seemed like he was unable to even understand an ethical premise that referred to subjective experience, positive and negative experiences of sentient creatures as a premise. He kept changing it to the instrumental role that they played in ecosystems, or what humans in fact have done with them throughout history or whatever. I wrote something about how I was legitimately starting to suspect that he's a sociopath on the vegan subreddit. Let's see like what right now.
Actually, yeah, I suspect that too. It's like it seems like whenever he talks, it's just look at me, look at me, look at me. Yeah.
It's like it really did seem like this is what I wrote in the subreddit. I've always disliked the dude, but now I'm really starting to think he's a sociopath. It's as if he doesn't even understand the concept of a moral premise, and he keeps trying to tangentially relate it to something instrumental. It reminds me of Cartman from certain South Park episodes. These episodes where like the other kids are trying to like explain moral reasoning to Cartman. Like, no, we just think that this thing is wrong because it hurts other people. And Cartman is like baffled by it. Like, yep. Tyson didn't seem to understand even the premises or the kind of argument that Jack Hancock was trying to make. And so he would go off into these things about ecosystems and the instrumental value of trees, and he wasn't even beginning to engage in the.
But do they not bleed?
Yeah.
It's like, okay. And it was so funny because he's like essentially alluding to all these value judgments, right? He's talking about like the value of trees, the value of the ecosystem.
How much time did they waste on whether a tree producing sap ought to be called bleeding? Who fucking cares? Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Jack would try and respond. He's like, "Well, what do you think about this?" And then Neil is like, "Well, I'm not adding any value judgments. I'm just saying what is." And it's like, "Well, no, not really. You're kind of trying to."
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He kept using these what people would ordinarily interpret as value-laden words.
Yeah.
While oddly saying that he didn't want to have an argument about values. Like
It seems like it seems like he came and he didn't want to have a conversation. Like Jack would just try and just open up something, and then he's just like, "No, I just want to talk. I don't want to conversate."
there were so many bizarre moments, but it's just like he's an example too, yeah, of these scientists who think that philosophy has no role. That old argument,
Yeah.
They they kind of think philosophy is just reasoning, and we do reasoning anyway, but we also know, we also do empirical studies, and so we already do what the philosophers do. We don't need them. They're extraneous. But then he's the perfect demonstration of why you need philosophy, because he is not putting together a coherent, careful argument in the slightest.
Yeah.
He's just
Absolutely.
like info dumping things that he's read without the structure, any sort of argument structure.
Drives me crazy. I about had an aneurysm today at work. My my buddy Cave was he was listening to a Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's on some podcast. Well, actually, he was listening to the Alex O'Connor Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he was telling me that like he loves Neil deGrasse Tyson. Like he's like, I love Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was actually he's actually not even a fan of Alex O'Connor. He didn't even know who he was. He was just listening to it for Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I was like, really? You're a fan of Neil deGrasse Tyson? Like what the? I guess he has a lot of fans because he's famous, but yeah.
I mean,
He's got Jordan Peterson energy.
He does. I mean, some people are fans of him because of his sort of like counter orthodoxy views, like as a black intellectual. He doesn't like completely toe the like woke church line on racial or race related cultural issues. So some people like him for that, probably the same reason people like Jordan Peterson and stuff. Yeah, I can't listen to Jordan Peterson for very long. I was pretty much done with him when he was on Sam Harris's podcast, and Harris kept trying to ask him these like very simple questions related to his level of God belief or his belief on certain religious claims, and then Peterson would just start going off, evading the simple, often yes/no question, and start talking about Nietzsche and Carl Jung and archetypes and the brothers Karamazov, and like, we just fucking asked you, like, come on now. He just asked you something like, "Do you think the Bible was written entirely by men or something?" And he can't answer that question.
What's man?
And what is right?
And
what does it mean to right?
It's not entirely clear, especially with these woke moralists. Yeah.
Oh man. So these guys are like, not Neil deGrasse Tyson. I can't say this about him, but Peterson is like, he's got this like conservative cultural position that's sort of anti woke, like against the this strand of thought coming from like Foucault and Derrida and stuff, right? But he talks just like them. His trains of thought are have the same like incomprehensibility that sort of maybe meant to put weaker minds in a state of awe. How could I ever comprehend the brilliance here? And then
Exactly. Yeah. I remember in my younger youth. I mean, I'm still in my younger youth, but in my younger youth, I was seduced by Jordan Peterson. And I would just spend hours watching Jordan Peterson videos and learn nothing. I
well, in
just
my
like
younger
listening to
youth,
those,
I
yeah.
was seduced by Ayn Rand. And that's the
Oh,
main thing. That's the main thing I got to talk to Carson about, because her novels are, I still think her novels are pretty great, but her philosophy is just
objectivism.
one fallacy and non sequitur after another, with all these very angry like denouncements of the people who hold opposing views, while building this like just mess of a pseudo argument.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I was saved from Randianism, but I was probably out of it by the time I was 23 or 24. And but I know probably one of the people that helped me get out was Michael Huemer. And then much later he like played a role in my going vegan. But he I guess when he was still a grad student, probably in the mid late 90s, he had this post on on one of the Usenet groups. And now it's online, you can check it out, but it's called like a critique of the objectivist ethics or whatever, where he just goes, he like lays out her argument in very explicit like premises and conclusion form, and then dissects what's wrong with each of the premises and what's wrong with the moves that she seems to be making in the argument, and where all her hidden premises are. That kind of helped me see, when at the same time I was studying real philosophy, I was reading people who were really making very tight arguments, like Robert Nozick and John Rawls and Bentham and Mill and Peter Singer. And
Yeah.
I was realizing that Rand's thinking was just a mess. You know, she wasn't a professional philosopher. She wasn't even a good amateur philosopher. She didn't take things seriously. She didn't even really try to understand books that she read. And I think she formed opinions on lots and lots of thinkers without even reading anything that they wrote, just reading secondhand accounts of them.
Yeah.
And extremely bad intellectual role model for anybody. And so I've spent a pretty good chunk of my life, like not intensely focused on it, but part of what I've been involved with online is websites, you know, critiquing Rand and objectivism, and trying to help people get out of it, you know, trying to have these, it's kind of like talking to carnists, you know, having these conversations with young people who were enthralled by Rand, and started to point to these careful analyses of her arguments and explain why we grew out of it, and try to help people grow out of it and put her in a proper historical perspective. But I think Carson is clearly influenced by Rand, and if you hadn't gone through a Randian phase, you wouldn't quite see it. But you hear him talking to a lot of you guys, and when he says the things like he wouldn't sacrifice his life to stop another Holocaust, you know, I think everybody knows that that's kind of bullshit. Not just wrong, but that like he doesn't. That's not even really him, because you know that he's a nice guy, that he's not insane, and he's not a total
Yeah.
piece of shit. You could get that vibe from him, how he's living his life, how he interacts with people. But he's saying these things occasionally that only a piece of shit would actually like truly believe and live by.
But they align with like sort of libertarian Ayn Rand principles. Yeah.
It's like the kind of thing that somebody would say who's like emotionally influenced by Rand, her books, and wants to make ethical veganism somehow be compatible with like normal good ethics. And because I was there, we wanted to say that no egoism when you're around it, and you just want to say no, following your own true interest as a rational individual will lead you to always doing the right thing. Rand would say, it's a lie that egoism would make you want to cheat people, want to scam people as part of your business.
Yeah.
True egoism would make you want to run your business with integrity, and that's not what actual ethical egoism would lead to. You gotta jump through all these hoops, and you gotta twist your mind into knots in the world of Rand in order to try to say that you're an ethical egoist who wouldn't sacrifice yourself for anything, while being a normal good person at the same time.
Yeah, no, it's a philosophy of greed and selfishness, and yeah.
But it's really not, that's the detractor is like the people on the left that just want to hold up Rand, and the people who get into her,
Sure.
as if they really were just total pieces of shit all the time. That's not true at all. What they usually are is people who just have a conventional worldview of like, work hard, so you keep what you earn, just kind of like a standard, like conservative pro-business philosophy.
Yeah.
But then they want to call it ethical egoism. They just want to like tack on this idea that philosophy is really all about putting your own well-being at the center of everything, and it's not at all. Like there's all sorts of sacrifice to the larger good that's implied in like the social and political views that Randians actually live by. But they have this like nominal egoism. They want to call themselves egoists, and they want to say things like like that, the things that when Carson says, people just go, "Oh, okay, really," and then they just move on to another topic. But like saying you would not sacrifice your own life to stop another Holocaust, or saying like your own child is so important that you'd pull the trolley lever and kill 1 million other kids to save your kid. These are things that people in the thrall of Rand, I believe, feel obliged to say. But
yeah, I'm trying.
They wouldn't actually act that way.
Yeah,
because somebody would have to be a total piece of shit to act that way.
Sure. Yeah, this is bringing me back to my libertarian days, and I think I would have definitely very similar views. But I don't think I was. I don't think I was a.
I don't think it's like his actual deep down like ethical view that he would
Sure. Yeah.
conduct his life by. I think it's like it's a verbal performance because he's to fit the some kind of lingering like ideology, or just Rand's novels are really interesting, and the way that her characters are and the kind of worldview presented in them is really fascinating. I think it's good for people to read when they're sort of old enough to be immune Atlas Shrugged is
Yeah.
a really, really great novel to read when you're 30. Really dangerous novel for a lot of people to read when they're 15.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's when a lot of people kind of go towards uh like anarcho-capitalist libertarianism, or in high school when they
Mhm.
I don't know, they'll I know I got into it through Ron Paul.
Mhm.
Yeah, Ron Paul was my segue towards it. What kind of got me out of my sort of libertarian phase, I think, was probably Sam Cedar. Watching Sam Cedar debate libertarians.
Oh, I don't know who that is.
He's a political commentator. These days he's kind of uh, I'm not a huge fan, but he used to debate, like, libertarians would call in, and Sam Cedar was just so good at destroying their arguments, that, at least from a teenager perspective, I was like, because he would just say things I had never, because I was in this libertarian bubble and I had never heard any, like, um, arguments against it. And Sam Cedar would just come in, like, someone would come in and they'd be like, taxation is theft, and Sam Cedar would just, like, destroy that. And yeah, and he, in fact, there was a couple of um, libertarian, like, presidential candidates, like, what was his name? So there was in 2016 there was Gary Johnson, then there was Austin Peterson, and then there was like the runner up, or not, I guess John Mac. But yeah, one of those candidates debated Sam Cedar, and within like 15 minutes, like, he was like legitimately like crying and like just like having an emotional breakdown, and Sam Cedar's just giving these basic, like, anti-libertarian arguments. Yeah, but yeah,
What's Cedar's political orientation? Center left or?
yeah, left, like I guess like a progressive, I guess.
He doesn't have his own like far left Marxist kind of viewpoint or anything. He's just more like mainstream.
Yeah, more like mainstream. Like, I mean, I think he supported Bernie Sanders. Um, yeah, I put him in the
Do you read
realm.
do you read Scott Alexander at all? Now it's called Astral Codex 10, formerly called Slate Star Codex. He's kind of famous blogger, really good writer. He's a psychiatrist, but he's very, very popular in the rationality community. You reminded me when you said taxation is theft of this Scott Alexander piece. It's called The Non-Central Fallacy, the Worst Argument in the World. And really, really useful to me over the years. Think about this piece all the time. And this is his description of the non-central fallacy. X is in a category whose archetypal member gives us a certain emotional reaction. Therefore, we should apply that emotional reaction to X, even though it is not a central category member. And then he says, it sounds dumb when you put it like that. Who even does that anyway? And then he gives all these examples. Suppose someone wants to build a statue honoring Martin Luther King Jr. for his nonviolent resistance. An opponent of the statue objects, but Martin Luther King was a criminal. And he says, any historian can confirm this is correct. He technically broke a law, But in this case, calling Martin Luther King a criminal is non-central because the archetypal criminal is a mugger or a bank robber, driven only by greed, etc., preying on the innocent. We don't like these things. Calling someone a criminal lowers our opinion of them. The opponent is saying, because you don't like criminals and Martin Luther King is a criminal, you should stop liking Martin Luther King. But King doesn't share the central features of the archetypal criminal. He's not driven by greed. He's not preying on the innocent. He's not weakening the fabric of society. Therefore, even though he is a criminal, there's no reason to dislike King. Yeah. So that's the gist of it. But then his list of examples is just like, oh my God, this is what you hear all the time. Abortion is murder. Archetypal murder is Charles Manson breaking into your house and shooting you. Genetic engineering to cure diseases is eugenics. And evolutionary psychology is sexist. And then he says, if you define sexist as believing in some kind of difference between the sexes, then this is true of you, psych. But why exactly is sexism bad? Because sexism claims that, men are better than women, and so women should have fewer rights. Does evopsych claim this? No. Then what's wrong with it? It's sexist. So it's this kind of, you get in this emotional trap of putting this label that attaches to a central concept of a category onto something, and then if you're like in an emotionally driven mood, you can't break out of it. Capital punishment is murder. Taxation is theft, right? Like endless. Yeah, technically you can relate taxation to the definition of theft, but taxation doesn't have many of the central features associated with the most common types of theft, right?
Yeah. Well, I've always just said taxation is theft. It's just justified.
It's justified. See, yeah, that's way more honest. That's like what I use the term magic words all the time to talk about deontological thinking, like when we were talking about consent before. I'm like, okay, to just be like, to be honest and straightforward with your language, there are clearly examples of behavior that's non-consensual but still morally good, but what the magic words person wants to do is say, no, that's implicitly consensual. Add this extra word to preserve their generalization. So it's way more honest to say, okay, taxation is theft, but sometimes theft is the better solution in a society, instead of saying, no, but you see, it's not theft because, and then try to add extra words in. Or say something that's not true, like there was a social contract that made us implicitly agree to be taxed or something like that, which is just like, it's just obviously false. We didn't agree to anything like that. So instead you should just say, yeah, I mean, we don't really have any clearly better option than to have some theft at some level of society. And we should just try to, yeah.
Especially with the whole I guess natural hierarchies that exist based on, I mean, going back to like the eugenics and things, like some people are just born with bad a lot of success comes down to luck, right? Have you read Michael Sandel's book, The Tyranny of Merit?
No, I know of it. I think I might have heard him talk about it. But I haven't read any of his books. I've seen interviews with him.
Yeah, well, I mean, he makes like a really compelling case for like how really essentially everything boils down to luck, where it's like you can be Michael Jordan, right? But if you're born in Renaissance Italy and nobody cares about basketball, then you're kind of out of luck, right? So they're kind of like based on like the things that we value, we happen to value. There exist these like hierarchies where there's going to be uber successful people and people that aren't as successful, and we kind of have like a I don't know if obligation is the right word, but where taxation sort of becomes justified, so we can than have sort of I don't even want to say level playing field, but like where you don't have like a group of people that are just suffering and experiencing all this like pain
Yeah.
by no choice of their own. Yeah.
I mean, there's still all kinds of consequentialist arguments for not trying to have a entirely like equitable wealth level across society, right? Because incentives are a real thing within individuals, even though we didn't earn our aptitude. I mean, it's still the case that almost everybody, if they were paid the same amount to not do any work as they are in their job, they would opt to just not do any work, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you need to be able to have incentives in place, and then
Sure.
you also probably need to recognize that even if people didn't choose to have the type of brains that would squander wealth that was in their hands, versus somebody who would like start a new like productive project that would add a lot more value to the world, even though one person isn't like more deserving of getting that brain than the other person for the brain they got, we still have a societal interest in having more wealth be in the hands of the person who does useful things with it, right?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Because they're going to bring about better consequences. They have the intellect to, yeah.
Exactly. And set. Beer. Yeah, so that's the good side of libertarianism, is the respect for market incentives in organizing society and in getting value produced. The bad side is like the deontology, the deontological, freedom must never be infringed, which ends up contradicting itself. And then the other bad side is being delusional about like some kind of magical free will being responsible for some of us having the positive traits that we do, rather than the luck of genetics.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of Rand too, right? Is it's usually the left, the cultural conditioning, everything is nurture left wing that opposes the reality of genetics. But Randians did too, and they do, because they want to attribute the virtue of the successful industrialist business tycoon just to this moral act of free will. They chose to apply their mind to the world, and anybody could have done that just as much as they could, but they were the ones who did, and so that's why they deserve everything that they have. It's like reality science. It's science denial that's usually associated with the left, but it's associated with certain strands of the right too.
Yeah.
And the reality is, that the main two things that we're determined by are our genetics and random chance events that happen or don't happen to us. Like whether we were the one that got hit by a car when we were 12 and that caused us chronic pain throughout our life. And what, like you said, where about Sandel, whether we were born into a society that makes our positive traits very useful or hardly useful.
Yeah.
Whether, like there's probably all these evolutionary trade-offs where people got, like, if you want to know why our eyesight got worse, probably a lot of it is that there are genetic mutations that did very useful things for people, maybe made us smarter, maybe made us like more sociable, or maybe improved our metabolism, but that same gene variant made our eyesight worse. And so in a world without eyeglasses, and in a world without division of labor, in a world where everybody had to be a hunter or gatherer that needed good eyesight, they would have just died out. That genetic variant never could have taken hold. But because we were born in a place that has these glasses, and our ancestors that maybe had similar traits, we were able to evolve into people that can do whatever we can do. Never would have happened if the glasses hadn't been there in the society where keen vision is not so crucial, hadn't been there. So we're so dependent on our genetics and on our unearned circumstances in all sorts of ways. I think Sandel is definitely on the left, right? A solid leftist. But this kind of consideration doesn't put me on the left. It actually is the problem that I have with the left kind of woke identity politics, is that I think woke identity politics only chooses a small handful of things that they count, right? It only looks at different demographic groups that it can form a political coalition from, but it doesn't like take into account the fact that Michael Jordan is black and you're white, but it won't take into account the fact that like he's like taller and way more athletic and better looking, like all this other stuff. Doesn't want to take that into account, right?
Yeah.
Even he's more ambitious than you or me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because ambition is also heavily genetic. Work ethic is heavily genetic, people attach all this moral significance to certain personality traits. Like, people don't normally say that somebody's more moral than somebody else because they have a higher IQ, but they say that one person's more moral than another because they they don't steal. But we know that IQ is strongly negatively correlated with stealing. So nobody wants to just say outright, if you have a higher IQ, you're more moral. Because we know that it's a kind of unearned genetic feature, but then we put moral judgments on people for doing things that we just scientifically know are heavily associated with lower IQs. So, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm
Probably just what Sandel is saying.
I'm a pretty hardcore determinist, so I agree with everything. Yep. Well, I might. What was that?
I was going to ask you if you ever read Slaughterhouse-Five.
Slaughterhouse-Five. What's that?
Kurt Vonnegut's novel. Pretty short novel. You should definitely read it.
Slaughterhouse-5. Yeah, I'll give it a go.
Slaughterhouse-5, so Vonnegut, the author, was actually a prisoner of war in Dresden when it was firebombed by the Allies. And so the main character, fictional character, was also has that same experience. So the novel is in part about the war, being a prisoner of war in the firebombing of Dresden, but the character, it's also a science fiction novel where the character's like consciousness jumps around in time throughout his life, and he associates it with this moment after the war when he's abducted by these aliens that live in 4 dimensions. And so they don't believe in free will. They kind of don't understand the human concept of free will because all of time exists for them in this determined way. And the main character starts to adopt their mentality and try to spread it to humanity. It's very, I think, very much down your lane.
I'm intrigued. Yeah, I'll give it a go.
Anyway, looks like you're wanting to go.
Yeah, I think I'll let you go. I need to make some dinner, and I also have to pee. So,
all right, man. It's nice.
Yeah, it was
catching up.
It was good chat. Yeah, good chatting, man. So
I'll catch you later, dude.
Yep.